No Place Like Home, a short story by Robert P. Fitton. Because of Aunt Greta's violent and sudden death, Murdock knew Veronica feared everything about the house, but he longed for her to see where he had spent his summers as a youth. Aunt Greta died years ago, and the house, spoils from his cousin's will, needed repair. Veronica would see the house and return to the West Coast while he made arrangements to sell the property. He ignored his reoccurring nightmares of thick clouds encircling the house and eerie noises hidden in the moonlit garden. Instead, his mind traveled back to the warm summer days, listening to Aunt Greta's music box melodies on the porch, or chasing the elusive fireflies with Richie and Ralphie Evans. The chirping crickets reverberated in the July twilight as he played hide-and-go-seek with the Crandall kids. Once they left the highway and rumbled over the rolling rural roads, Veronica made an effort to be pleasant. He could have sent her home to San Francisco instead of dragging her into his past. They drove along the once green farm fields, now staked with tract housing and asphalt roads and stockade fences. The Evans' tiny wood corner store had been transformed into a yellow cinder-block supermarket. He veered right and over the hill toward Aunt Greta's house. Time had molded his summer homestead into a dull remnant of its once vital appearance. The deep gray paint hung on sagging clapboards, and the original century-old window glass was replaced by weathered plywood sheets. Murdock stopped the car and wandered outside. He crossed the cracked sidewalk to the rusted wrought-iron gate. The front yard, overgrown with wavy grass, had become a repository for cans, bottles, and soggy paper. The gate squeaked as Veronica's car door slammed and he crossed the sunken cement slabs. "Looks like it needs a lot of work," she called. "It's disgusting is what it is." Murdock pushed aside the porch's numerous spider webs below the rotted ceiling boards. "It would look better if the grass were cut and paint would bring it back to life. Just put it on the market and get what you can for it, and then come back home." He stepped onto the loose floorboards. "You're not thinking of fixing this up, are you?" "I don't know." He turned to the darkened door glass. "Donnie, we're going to be married in 2 weeks. There's nothing left here for you. Hire a realtor and let him worry about unloading the place." Murdock timed each of his steps over the wooden floorboards and stroked his chin. "Give me 10 days. I need to do this, Veronica. Then I'll fly back and we'll forget about Aunt Greta's house forever." From the sidewalk, she stared at the upper boarded windows as he created a matted trail across the tall grass. He promised to call her periodically during the next 10 days, and they would be married upon his return to the city. At the front gate, Murdock, suitcase at his feet, kissed her goodbye. She got in the car and brought it around. The beeping horn startled him, and she quickly disappeared down the hill. As the hot sun dried his pores, he walked upright onto the porch and pinched the cooler steel house key. The gray-haired man reflected in the dark door window provided ample evidence the narrow-shouldered, chestnut-haired boy lived in the past. The door flew open when he turned the key. Sunlight swept across the sheet-covered living-room furniture as stagnant air escaped outside. Aunt Greta had lived here. He peered down the hallway to the Dutch louver kitchen doors, and his eyes followed the wooden banister to the darkened second floor. Curling his fingers, he pushed the window plywood. The rusted nails loosened with a mournful wail, and the plywood keeled over. Like a madman determined to unleash buried demons, he attacked the adjoining windows, and by sunset plywood sheets were strewn across the yard grass. With his hands on his hips, he anchored himself on the quiet street, and he sensed he had brought life back to Aunt Greta's house. At an uncompromising pace through the week, Murdock carefully returned the furniture, lamps, and his aunt's novelties to their old location. With the electricity restored, he turned his energies outside. He sharpened Aunt Greta's push-mower blades and sliced the wispy grass to a buzz-cut exactness, Weeds, yanked from her rich soil garden, revealed narrow-stemmed orange tiger lilies and a scattering of gold black-eyed Susans. For days he scraped the clapboards and joyfully applied layer after layer of gray paint as he restored the house to match his boyhood memories. He extended a dinner invitation to the Evans boys. Hefty in frame, with smooth bald heads, they chain-smoked stinky cigars and marveled at his reconstruction. Except for his aunt's old landscape picture over the fireplace, everything looked remarkably like the old days. Richie detailed events Murdock had long forgotten, while his brother provided spice to the stories. They both wanted to meet Veronica and pleaded with Murdock to stay in the house. Nearing midnight, as they prepared to leave, something dragged slowly across his aunt's second-floor bedroom. Murdock shot up the hallway staircase, flipped the bedroom light switch, but saw nothing. The three men searched upstairs and the attic. An old picture must have fallen, or perhaps the floor joist had just cracked with age. He accompanied his friends into the balmy summer air. The front gate still needed oil. They moved onto the street and climbed the hill to the supermarket parking lot. The Evans boys headed for their new contemporary home across the street, but Murdock ran to the payphone near the supermarket's automatic doors. He tapped out Veronica's number and the line rang, but as he turned back toward Aunt Greta's house, the lights blinked off, and only the dim streetlight lamp illuminated the murky facade. Veronica's voice punctuated the answering machine greeting as he glanced back at the house. Aunt Greta's second-floor bedroom suddenly brightened. The answering machine beeped, but he held the receiver loosely and let it dangle. He jogged across the parking lot and down the road, his eyes fixed to the second-floor Tiffany window lamp. He wiped his wet forehead and breathed rapidly as something darted by the window and the lamp went dark. Saturated sweat darkened his pink sports shirt as he raced up the sidewalk. He ran across the porch floorboards and unlocked the door, but during the next 15 minutes, a complete search of the house, from the dusty attic rafters down to the humid dirt floor basement, revealed nothing. He thought Aunt Greta's bedroom had a hint of lilac scent as he cautiously stepped forward and turned on the window light. His aunt's bedtime stories reverberated in his head as he touched her quilted country bedspread. The brass lamp must have loosened. After locking the house, he retreated up the stairs into his old bedroom with the sports wallpaper across from Aunt Greta's room. He turned on the wood veneer floor model radio, and while he waited for the tubes to warm, twisted the air conditioner knob. A rock music beat competed with the air conditioner's chilling fan as he crawled into his boyhood bed. Tomorrow, he would call the realtor, forget about the past, and move on. He awoke in the morning light's freezing air, checked the realtor's number in his pocket notebook, and then lumbered downstairs to the front door. Fog swirled around the outside beveled glass, and the door popped like a soda can opening. He pushed through the cloudy mass and staggered into the sunlight's glare, but the porch shook when the door slammed behind him. What the hell is going on here? The town's white-haired postman called from the street. By God, if it doesn't look like it used to! Murdock glanced at the door again, and the postman opened the front gate. I don't suppose any mail is coming to this house. Well, not since Greta died. I hear you putting the house on the market. Today, and then I'm getting married. I was surprised to see you fix the old place up. Then again, there's a reason for everything we do in this life, isn't there? Yeah, I guess that's true. Zip wished him good luck with his upcoming marriage. Murdock now felt the urge to leave town and get back to the faster-paced city life. He stood on the porch, watching a persistent bulldozer push back the earth near the new condos down the hill. His hand covered the dull brass knob, but the inner mechanism stuck. Come on, what's the matter with this thing? He nudged the door, but it flung open with a considerable force. The kitchen's table radio blasted through an icy cold fog.
A fine ballad from a fine artist. WXC time is approaching 10 o'clock. And now, time for the news headlines. Are you there?
Murdock brushed away the fog and edged his way inside. The front door closed and he spun around. The room furniture was moved and the old beige window shades cut a soft glow over the colorful braided rugs. Bare trees cut deep shadows over the fallen leaves. Aunt Greta's landscape picture was now hung above the fireplace.
Good morning, and here is the news for Friday, November 22nd, 1963.
1963.
President Kennedy this morning spoke in front of the Chamber of Commerce breakfast in Fort Worth, Texas. The President stressed Fort Worth's role in America's national security. Mr. Kennedy is accompanied by his wife, Jackie, Vice President Lyndon Johnson and Lady Bird, Governor and Mrs. John Conley. The party will take a short flight to Dallas, where the President will address a midday lunch at the Trademark in the city.
Mr. Greenwald's Tiergarten by Robert P. Fitton. He really does believe he's some man named Greenwald, said Dr. Springer. Eddie stepped back and gazed at his wife and faced the doctor. What's the matter? Pop gone nuts or something, huh? The doctor took him aside. Mr. Ramirez, I wouldn't exactly use those words around your father. Mean stop saying Pop's a Looney Tune? Yeah, I get you. The doctor lowered his voice. Just try and humor him. Humor? I ain't no comedian, Doc. Right. Your father is still medicated, although we have changed the dosage in order to break the apprehension and excitement. Ah, Hulfunger. Excuse me? Asked Springer. My husband says Hulfunger when he'll do what somebody says, but he doesn't understand why, said Gladys. I see. Let's go down to your father's room. Thanks, Doc, said Eddie. Eddie nodded. They marched down to the wire mesh doors and started up the stairs. Hey, why does he still call himself Greenwald? Well, your father's mind is still in great turmoil. He's perturbed by his placement here at the institution. His underlying problems may be more pervasive. Preoccupation with a life of affluence appears to be related to the fact that he never held a steady job in 30 years. This projecting behavior... Hey, he ain't getting dirty, is he? No, Mr. Ramirez. I was referring to a psychological state. Springer opened the upper doors and they walked into Pop's corridor. I believe he's trying to place blame in his life on certain irreconcilable factors and dispositions, and his reference to this man named Jackson leaves me baffled. Well, we ain't never heard of no Jackson. Eddie saw Pop at the end of the corridor, and he was hunched over in his red flannel robe and adjusted his black-framed glasses as he turned. Just try and tone down your conversation with him, said Springer. Hey, he's using that color crap in his hair again, Gladys. Eddie walked toward his father. Hey, Pop! Ah, the return of the prodigal son and his wife. Hey, Pop! Giants game starts in half an hour. Maybe you don't give a shit about football anymore either. The Giants are really not my problem. Yeah, right, said Eddie, sniffing the air. This place always smells like piss. Nature of the beast. Huh, beast? Not important. How are you, Edward? I'm not bad, Pop. Not bad at all. He looked into his father's wide brown eyes. They giving you them shots? Dr. Springer's use of the mood-alterating drugs is tempering my hostility for sure. I am fully cognizant of this inexorable situation and take full responsibility for starting this sequence. I really don't know what happened to Jackson. I keep calling him. Hey, Pop, who the hell is Jackson? The man I contracted with, Edward. The man who assured me I could control this reality. Pop looked up at the ceiling. Did you hear that, Jackson? Eddie studied the ceiling, but only saw peeling paint and water stains. Hey, Pop, come on, there ain't no Jackson. Pop produced a huge smile. Oh, I know it's impossible for you to understand who I am. Yeah, you're Frank Ramirez. No, I am Sidney B. Greenwald, and I own a fashion clothing store based in Wilmington, Delaware. I am quite wealthy, or was. Wealthy? You ain't never been wealthy. Eddie saw Springer and Gladys over his shoulder. "Ha! This is all bullshit. You never owned a damn thing in your life." Pop nodded and looked out the window. "I don't expect you to understand." "I understand, yeah. That you made up this stupid story so you could stay in here no charge." "Eddie, you don't realize Jackson's power." Eddie looked at Gladys. "Let's just watch the blipping game. We're getting nowhere with this Jackson bullshit. Pop's lying like a bastard." Pop slowly turned and his face tightened as he spoke. "I told Jackson I was bored when he came into my office suite. He promised me a virtual world. Guess we all have to live within our worlds, prefabricated or real." Eddie rolled his eyes and pointed at Springer. "Hey, we're out of here." Springer nodded. Gladys pulled her pocketbook over her shoulder as they stepped into the corridor, but Pop's voice trailed out of the room. "I really am Sidney B. Greenwald." Greenwald sat alone in the sanitarium and watched the heavy storm clouds advance across the bay as the rain pelted the outside terraces. Car taillights moved like figures on a computer game across the suspension bridge as the trees bent in the wind. "Well, Jackson, this isn't a private hell. I don't know what is. It all happens the same as the real world. Wet, cold, rain. I can feel the coolness. I can sense the moisture. The same physical laws. The same human behavior right down to the hatred in Edward's eyes. My God, it is reality." A young man's shadowy figure caught his eye, and a closer inspection revealed a scrawny kid, loose Johnny hanging from his bones and his dry hair scattered on his oversized head. He slouched along the wall, and when he made eye contact with Greenwald, every interaction seemed to represent an incalculable infraction. Greenwald stood and tightened his plaid robe. "My name is Greenwald, Sidney B." The boy turned his head. "Don't hit me. I wasn't eavesdropping. I heard you talking." "I was just rambling to myself, feeling sorry for my condition in life. What's your name, son?" The young man, still refraining from eye contact, inched his way up the plaster wall until he stood upright. His soft blue eyes seemed yearning for affection. "I am so sorry." Greenwald looked up. "Jackson, suffering exists here. Did he buy your Tiergarten too? We're all suffering, all of us." Who is Jackson?" Greenwald smiled. He slowly reached out and held the boy's hand. "Indeed, who is Jackson?" "Is Jackson God?" Greenwald shook his head. He motioned the boy over to the orange vinyl couch. Greenwald leaned closer once they sat. "Jackson sold me a bill of goods." You bought something from Jackson?" "Yes, I did." "My name is Joseph." "How long have you been here, Joseph?" He shook his head and scanned the room. I don't know. Can we leave here?" "I don't think so. Not until we die, anyway." Joseph moved his fingers around Greenwald's wrist and looked at his plastic identification bracelet. Greenwald had the nurses put the proper name in the tag. "Sidney." "You can call me Sidney." Joseph smiled. "Sidney." They both turned as the frizzy orange-haired Flora, face dabbed with makeup and lips ruby red, strutted into the solarium. "Miss Hollywood." Greenwald grinned. "She is." A little unshaved bald man, Johnny opened back, moved inside. He bounced around the room, bent over and raised his brows, pretending he smoked a cigar. Joseph gasped. "Baldback." "You don't mind guests, do you, Joseph?" "No, Sidney." "Gather round, my good friends." "I'm a star from the land of make-believe," said Miss Hollywood. Joseph's eyes opened and he turned to Greenwald as Baldback nuzzled against Miss Hollywood's blue nightgown. "Then why don't you make believe that you're kissing me? Come away with me, my dear Flora." "Disgusting little rat, isn't he?" Baldback kissed her hand. "My lovely little flower." Then he turned to Greenwald and Joseph. "Venus flytrap." Greenwald smiled and squeezed Joseph's wrist. "What are you in for, anyways, Mr. Greenwald?" asked Miss Hollywood. "In this prison, I refuse to accept life." "Huh?" Being Frank Ramirez, that's who they say I am.
You need to find a way out. May I suggest a slingshot? A little quick, but it will work,
said Ballback. Greenwald sighed and crossed his legs. I'm afraid there is no way out.
Then kill yourself, cried Miss Hollywood.
More patients, some in wheelchairs, trickled into the room. Some people think that that's the way to go.
How you gonna do it?
Asked Miss Hollywood. Greenwald stood and walked amongst them. No, that shall not be my course. Miss Hollywood fluttered her black, thick eyelashes.
You can't be both Ramirez and Greenwald.
I am Greenwald, and I've had a grand life. He peered at the people in the hallway and motioned them inside. My brother and I opened a clothing store 25 years ago. Sold only the best. We expanded gradually. Last year we had 55 stores.
If you're so smart, what are you doing in here?
Asked a large man stuffed in a soft cushioned chair. Greed, my friend, greed. I wanted more. And the answer to my greed came in Germany, a small alpine town. That's where I met Jackson. Greenwald thought back to the tiny chalet in the village, where the fluffy-haired Jackson's smooth olive skin glowed by the firelight. He seemed to know Greenwald immediately and wanted to talk business. Full background checks were completed before Jackson approached new prospects. His clients were exclusive and affluent, and he could fulfill their every need. The Monstrosity by Robert P. Fitton. Vincent Montessori leaned back in the smooth leather seat as his driver drove the limo across town. He loosened his silk tie, gripped the phone, and picked up his drink from the side table.
Listen, you chump. Either you get the material like you were supposed to, or it's over. I'll ruin you as a supplier.
He clicked off the line and slurped the bourbon into his mouth.
Damn these people. They all work for me.
The limo swung into a new mall parking lot. People lined the rope barriers protesting his arrival. His aides rushed to the car, opening the door as the limo glided to a stop. Michael leaned inside. Everything is set, Mr. Montessori.
Why are those damned idiots out there?
They want the environment back. Montessori strained as he got out of the car. The shouting was louder in the cooler outside air.
Screw them. I gave them the mall. What the hell? We're talking about progress here.
Yes, sir. A burst of sunlight through a break in the clouds brightened the mall's pink granite facade, spanning 3 stories above the arched entrance. He had spent a fortune on reflective glass sheets along the upper 2 wings. The protests intensified as he was escorted to the front entrance.
Money grubber!
Shouted some bland-faced woman in jeans and a sweatshirt. Montessori stopped and took a few steps toward all of them.
Why don't you ingrates get back to the woods with the rest of the animals?
Hey, man, you ruined our land.
A bearded man cried and raised his fist.
Yeah, well, call the Sierra Club.
He started to open the entrance doors. A contingent of local leaders lined the inner neon sign corridor. The fat little mayor in his plaid green suit stuck out his hand.
Well, it's an honor, Mr. Montessori.
Yeah, well, if it's such an honor, why are those scum out there yelling insults at me?
I'm sorry, the court order.
Montessori rolled his eyes to Michael and focused on the towering water fountain under the skylight dome ahead. He walked ahead of his aide.
Well, I see they finally got the correct water pressure, Michael.
Reply, somebody yelled behind him. He stopped, and so did the crowd following him. A man in an olive army jacket and jeans screamed like a nut from an insane asylum. Cops chased him up the corridor.
You ruined the earth. You're a criminal. You're a criminal.
Cops pounced on the guy and wrestled him to the tiles.
I'm prepared to go to jail.
The mayor moved next to Montessori.
Oh, Mr. Montessori, I have a private room reserved for you away from these, No, I wish to talk to this man.
Hey, Mr. Montessori, do you really think that's a good idea? Montessori walked by Michael as the man squirmed in the office's arm locks.
Hey, you think you're a real sharpie, don't you?
He pointed his finger at the ruddy man's face.
Let me tell you, anyone can protest. Few men can build, you coward.
You're a destroyer, a money grubber.
I made my money by hard work. Hard work, what I deemed right. Mr.
McNabb, John C. McNabb.
And what you think may not be right.
The mayor and the assembled guests stared at him as he grinned at McNabb.
And what gives you the right to trespass on private property, Mr. McNabb?
Maybe you should ask that question yourself. The only difference is that you have the money and the power. I only have my beliefs.
Montessori closed his eyes for a moment.
Oh, I'm touched. But you people had every chance to stop this project. And democracy is at work, Mr. McNabb. The town council voted this mall into existence.
Michael stood closer.
I think we should move along, sir.
Montessori nodded, but McNabb started again.
Yeah, the town council voted after you paid them to vote.
Get him out of here. Lock him up,
said Montessori as he kept walking. The mall manager rushed up to him as he continued toward the water fountain.
What do you want? We might be sued. I think he should be released.
Montessori stopped and looked back toward McNabb, being dragged outside. Then he faced the little mall manager.
You're fired.
Sir?
I have a wife and 3 children, Mr. Montessori. That's not my problem.
He continued his walking pace. The manager protested to the mayor, and Montessori smiled, shaking his head as he approached the fountain. The fountain blossomed into a wide-spreading surge, bubbling into the rich blue mosaic rim below. When he turned, the manager, arms extended, ran at a full clip. Montessori was hit in the chest. His legs buckled, and he careened into the fountain. The cool moisture saturated his suit, and his head smacked against the rim tiles. Darkness and a floating sensation took his thoughts into a confused, half-conscious jumble. He swished his arms through the water and rose upward. Sunlight covered the water sheets, cascading into the pool. He did not see Michael or the mayor's people.
Michael!
The water dripped off his clothes. He removed his suit coat and tossed it over the rim. The mall behind him was empty.
Where the hell is everybody?
He trudged through the water and climbed onto the vinyl floor tiles. The neon store lights blazed down the vacant mall's length. His mushy shoes left a track of water to the first storefront. Blue digits were illuminated on the register readouts, and lights blazed as if the store was open for business. He rubbed the stinging lump on the back of his head and shuffled to the side corridor, retracing his steps to the outside entrance.
Well, this is damn strange.
Gray-layered clouds moved quickly above the yellow fall foliage across the parking lot. Orange-vested police held back shouting protesters behind the ropes. Montessori gazed back through the empty mall to the fountain as he gasped the aluminum door handle. The door was locked when he pushed.
Stepping out, Mr. Montessori?
He saw McNabb's reflection in the sheet glass.
Are you the cause of all this?
Indirectly.
Montessori spun around.
Well, open the doors before I have you arrested.
McNabb raised his head skyward and grinned.
You never learn, do you?
McNabb was less than 15 feet away when he turned.
I said open the door. I'm going to my limo. Where's Michael?
You know, Mr. Montessori, I have no problem with people making money.
I'm glad,
he said, rattling the door.
Is that what you do with your life?
You aren't in judgment of my life. I'll get out of here, you bastard.
In the glass, McNabb stepped closer.
Oh, you're free to leave this mall.
Montessori grit his teeth and turned. He pointed his finger.
Just because you've accomplished nothing in your worthless life.
I can go with you out the door if you wish.
I don't need you, McNabb.
The door moved. Montessori tripped on the threshold and stumbled onto slick brown tiles. Using a narrow mall corridor similar to a shopping center he had built in Rochester, New York 16 years ago. Shoppers moved quickly and music blared through the overhead ceiling speakers. The outside parking lot was smaller and packed with cars. The trees were green. Montessori pressed his lips firmly together and opened the door again. The outside lot was now replaced by a brightly painted cement floor of another mall. McNabb, in his army jacket and jeans, stood with one foot on an oak bench under an artificial tree.
Hey, welcome.
Am I dead? Did that blow on the head kill me?
Nope.
Okay, then tell me what the hell's going on here.
Shoppers passed by and moved into yet another outside lot. This time Montessori strutted past McNabb and into the mall.
I haven't got to be where I am in my life without trying, and I will try to get out of here.
Oh, your life has been quite an effort.
Shut up.
McNabb trailed behind him as he entered the food court a few minutes later and put his hands on his moistened pants. His swiftly beating heart fueled a hyper-anxiety throughout his body. Finding a way out required cunning. He darted into a joke shop and raced through the aisles into the back room. The kid at the counter yelled something when he reached the metal door within the cinder block wall. He twisted the greasy cold brass knob and banged on the door. With several sudden thrusts against the metal, he loosened the door. Now he produced long, gasping, deep breaths. He kicked the knob until the door was ajar. Pervading darkness spread before him. He fought to catch his breath.
You need to use the outside mall entrances, Mr. Montessori,
said McNabb as he entered the stockroom.
What's out there?
Nothing.
Smart guy. You listen to me, you twister. I'll get out of this. This...
monstrosity?
Yeah. What's your price? Every man has his price.
McNabb's face had that serious protester look.
I'm afraid I don't have a price. You'll have to find the key.
He looked into the darkness again.
The key to what?
When he turned, McNabb was gone, and the joke store clerk stood in the stockroom doorway. If you don't get out of here, mister, I'm going to have to call mall security.
I own this mall. I own them all.
He stomped past the clerk, through the store, and back into the mall. A group of young kids with baseball hats and ears pierced with multiple studs moved up the ramp to his right. They laughed at him as he walked by. He thought he recognized one voice.
Vinny, you're old.
Montessori stopped. The kids looked familiar.
How do I get out of here?
Same way you got in, dude. He squinted and looked at a kid with a thin ponytail.
Stevie Arnold.
Vinny Montessori. He laughed and lit a cigarette.
And me, Johnny Epstein, said the shorter kid. Used to beat me up, Vinny. You remember that?
Montessori started forward again.
You can get out by yourself, Vinny.
He stopped and pulled out a soaked $100 bill from his wallet.
$100 gets me out of here.
You don't pay off people, dude. You work with the people. You don't beat them up. You treat them with respect.
Montessori held up the soggy bill. Stevie walked closer, clamped his hand over the bill, and rolled it into a ball. Then he threw it back to his friends. Johnny deposited it in a trash bin near the wall phones. Montessori said nothing as he headed for the phones. He quickly dialed his driver's cell phone. The line rang briskly, but McNabb answered the phone.
This is John McNabb.
Where the hell are you?
Asked Montessori as he reached the trash bin for the compressed bill. The plastic bag was empty and the kids were gone.
McNabb, I need your help.
I thought you wanted me arrested.
Heat of the moment. Listen, I don't know what you've done or how you've done this, but I need to get out. I can't keep opening doors into other malls. This is insane.
Fast Forward by Robert P. Fitton. The Grand Hall, set under a 3-kilometer-wide dome, dwarfed anything in the galaxy. The exalted galactic ruler, leader of half of the galaxy's human beings, gazed over the adulterating throng as his guards lifted his golden throne onto the hand-carved orca wood pedestal. He reached for his remole and slowly lowered his thumb onto the well-worn button. All motion within the room ceased, and he stood, raising his arms to the stars.
Fools! They will think I have vanished!
He sprang from the throne onto the stage and peered at his reflection in the template mirrors. His graying hair reminded him that 15 years had passed since he had left the college. He merged his rotund body through the template mirror and into the banquet hall, but stopped to view the food spread over the room-length table and the motionless crowd in the room. Frozen steam molecules were suspended over the food that generated no heat. He stood at the table center and removed the remole and debated whether to join the festivities. Bored, he released everything as if he were simply taking a movie off pause. The room flew into motion.
Enough!
They dropped in praise when they saw him appear. His guards, clad in red and gold satin, hurried to his side. "The feast has been prepared for my leader."
And the woman?
The guard clapped his hands, and several women clad in colorful sheer garments danced into the room. The exalted leader smashed his fists on the table. Like the excess food, these women were not enough to satisfy him. He prepared to reach for the remole.
Why must we be bored?
The guard fell to his knees. "I am sorry, my leader."
And why were there empty sections in the hall this evening?
"My leader, some colony people have taken to the streets, angry that you have withheld their spring food and clothing allowances. Many of them—"
Do not bother me with triviality. Get rid of them.
"Yes, my leader."
Enough. I grow bored with this.
He removed the remole and stopped everything again. Setting the remole in reverse would bring him through time and back to the college. He pushed his thumb onto the wider blue button, and the acceleration commenced. People buzzing about the room quickly blurred as he walked back into the grand hall. His entire day soon stretched like colored paint dripping onto a white spinning wheel, eventually dimming and darkening as the remole's red digits reversed and zoomed back to 0. He stopped, paused, and took a position in the corridor outside his old 6th-floor office at Craigton Hall. He saw himself as a younger man, hair deep brown and body slim behind his desk. "Steve Wilson speaking." "Yes, Dean Astor. No intrusion at all. You've made a decision? About the new department chairman, yes." "What?" "Dr. Milcoski." "Well, I wish him the best." Steve hung up and threw down the phone. He sprang from the chair and kicked it. The exalted ruler nodded.
You had every right to be upset, Steve.
Steve banged the oak filing cabinet. "He's an old man, pompous and egotistical old man. All my work gone because of Milcoski." The exalted ruler shook his head and pushed the remole, and moved ahead several years to a faculty party at Dean Astor's home. Steve's appearance had not changed, and he walked, drink in hand, toward the silver-haired Milcoski and several of his colleagues. "Ah, Professor Wilson, how nice of you to join our little group. By the way, does everyone know Steve Wilson was the youngest graduate student at Stanford?" Steve stood rigid. "I'm not here to recap my career, Dr. Milcoski, nor to play showman to the faculty." Milcoski gazed down briefly and smiled at his friends.
"If you will please excuse us."
He led Steve into the hallway.
"Steve, if you will forgive me, I believe you've consumed a little too much—"
"Liquor doesn't affect me, Walter."
"Something has your dander up tonight. What is it?"
Steve set the drink on the hall table and pointed at Milcoski. "You never deserved the department chairmanship, and you know it."
"Oh, so that's it. The usual. I should have guessed. Envy does not become you, Steve. Now, if you will pardon me—"
"I want the chairmanship, Walter. You've had it long enough. You certainly are in a position to retire if you wanted to." Milcoski started back into the front room.
"All work in a diminished capacity."
Milcoski turned.
"And you think you're the one to take my place, do you? I won't discuss it any further."
Steve followed him into the main room.
"I work hard. I worked hard long before you came on the scene, and I've worked hard since. All those years playing second fiddle to the great Walter Milcoski." "You are drunk, and you have a limited understanding of things. I enjoy people, Steve. That's why you are envious of me in my position."
"Envious of you driving around a run-down Volkswagen and living in an apartment over the stationer's store?"
"That is enough. It's the power you crave. The guest stared at Steve as he followed Milcoski out of the hall. That's it. It's the power. Milcoski wrapped his red scarf around his neck and donned his leather coat over his shoulders. You have no conception of what power truly is. Milcoski returned to the front room, bade farewell to Dean Astor, and diverted from Steve as he left. Steve ran to the sidelight and watched him negotiate the slippery front walk. He hurried to the closet and rummaged through the hangers for his own coat. As he fumbled with his coat, the dean shook his hand and wasted precious time blabbing about an upcoming faculty meeting. When Steve finally entered the cold air, Milcoski had backed his little red Volkswagen down the drive. He shifted and the smoky exhaust trailed down the snow-covered street. Killing Milcoski would be easy. Steve stepped through the chilly February air and thought about his plan. He would kill Milcoski by loosening the wood balustrade on the professor's third-floor balcony. And once he had the doctor on the porch, he would send Milcoski careening into the parking lot below. He laughed at the cleverness of his plan as he trudged down the snow-dusted Main Street sidewalk. A few minutes later, he passed Milcoski's car under the rear lot's street lamp, and he gazed up at the thin layer of snow on the third-floor balcony. Like a burglar, he moved swiftly up the aging wood staircase. At the kitchen door, he looked inside. Milcoski was settled in his recliner and picked up the TV's remote control, but abruptly set it back on the table. He checked his empty tobacco pouch, stood, and then grasped the remote in both hands. As Steve rubbed the fog off the window glass, Milcoski pushed the remote and vanished. Stunned, Steve checked again, not believing he had seen Milcoski disappear. He kicked the back door and ran into the living room. A room search confirmed that the doctor was gone. The front door chain lay securely in place. Steve stood in the center of the room as the glass clock on the mahogany piece slowly clicked out the seconds. You? He turned. Milcoski stood in front of the chair, the remote control still in his hand. Tiny colored lights blinked and red digits were displayed on an upper screen. You disappeared. I did? Are you telling me you can move from place to place at will? Milcoski held the device securely in his hand and grinned. Why, of course. I went down to Higgins' tobacco shop on Main Street, procured my tobacco, put in the appropriate currency in the register, and no one is the wiser. Except you, Steve. How is this possible? I am from your future, a once gifted child obsessed with time. He held the device in the air. This is absolute power. I lived on the Alphid colony. As a youth, I watched discs of the ancestral planet. It took years to perfect this. I can move forward or backward in time. I can stop time. Time to be rejuvenated. Rejuvenated? A complete genetic overhaul. Incredible. Steve deemed getting the device more important than killing Milcoski. You are a very clever man, but why waste your time here? I am a contented man. Hold my robe, Steve. The power will flow between us. I will not need to make any adjustment. Steve looked into Milcoski's eyes and slowly gripped his blue smoking jacket. Nothing changed. He watched the glass clock when Milcoski pushed the lower right button. The clock pendulum stopped in mid-stroke, and he turned to the doctor. What happened? We have paused the world around us. Milcoski led him into the kitchen and toward the broken door, but no cold air filtered inside. The snow on the railing outside had no temperature as they descended the staircase. The flakes were rigid in the dark air. On Main Street, a car locked in time shone its headlights across the lonely street. This can't be real, said Steve. As real as anything else. Don't you realize what you could do with this? They moved onto the snowbanked sidewalk. Milcoski stopped. I have seen the pain of the human condition. I earnestly try to change things, but I do not have the wisdom to alleviate pain. We can share the device. Milcoski laughed and shook his head. You and me? You would use the control for personal gain. I know you all too well, Steve.
What are you going to do with me?
I haven't decided yet.
They continued up the sidewalk past a young couple stuck in mid-stride. Their eyes were like glass crystals in a showcase, and their faces contorted in the midst of conversation. Even the dark hands of the glowing white clock face never moved past 11 minutes past 11 o'clock.
I am going to release the stop time.
Steve nodded. The couple, now behind them, walked hand in hand down the main street sidewalk and were engaged in a light conversation, and the car, gridlocked in time a few seconds before, kicked up the slush along the asphalt. The cold bit his hands and ears.
Now what? We are going to take a little trip. Now hold on.
Milcoski pushed the button above, and the clock tower hands spun madly as night flipped to day, flickering so only a dim twilight covered the town. The buildings remained firm. Trees disappeared, others grew in seconds and then disintegrated. New buildings appeared, some vanished.
The stationer's building will come down in 2116. Historic groups will try to save it. Keep your eye on it as we pass, Steve.
Like a blip on the radar screen, the 3-story building popped out of existence, replaced by a highly reflective green cylinder. New geometric shapes of varying colors formed across the street. Other buildings vanished, even the police station, but the clock tower remained. A bright flash momentarily blinded Steve. When he opened his eyes, none of the buildings stood. A warming breeze brushed his face as they crossed into a small field surrounded by a dense forest. Between the trees and the shadows, the clock tower survived. What happened?
Welcome to 3110 AD. You will find it very habitable here, Steve. In fact, you may become quite happy.
No, trust me with your secret, Walter.
Dean Astor told me the same thing.
Astor? No, he just left his party.
No, 5 years after the party, Astor retired. He, like you, found out my secret. Other people you don't know, but whom you will know, are here also.
Milcoski's private graveyard. You have no right to control people like this.
And you have no right to threaten me.
Steve grit his teeth and surveyed the fauna. He had no intention of staying here and clutched Milcoski's smoking jacket. It was imperative that he overpower the doctor. He continued asking questions about the future, tapping Milcoski's ego and letting him pontificate about his abilities and prowess in constructing the device.
Dr. Milcoski! Dr. Milcoski!
Dean Astor, clad in a bright orange jumpsuit, ran with a few other people toward the field. Milcoski's thumb moved toward the fast-forward button, but Steve yanked it, backhanded Milcoski's face, and thrust his knee into the doctor's stomach. He lunged for the control, wrestled it easy from Milcoski's hands, and pushed the pause button. Milcoski, his mouth half open in mid-sentence, assumed a figurine appearance in the bright sunlight. Astor and the others were frozen on the clearing's edge. Steve laughed and grasped the remote control tightly as he backed away. Once he distanced himself, he released the time stop. Milcoski called from across the clearing.
A race against time, Steve, and you won. Take a good look around you, Walter. Get used to 3110 AD. You, sir, are a victim of your own design.
Steve pushed the fast-forward button and sped away through time. The exalted galactic ruler again prepared to address his people. Killing the 5,000 had provided a splendid example of obedience, and the packed hall awaited his return. He faced his guards.
I will go among them this evening. Let them touch their leader.
He held a remole inside his garment and walked into the hall. A collective cheer rose from the gathering as he slowly raised his arms toward the sky dome. Encircled by his guards, he ambled across the platform and down the steps. A million hands and enlivened figures reached for him. They called his name, and he nodded as he passed. They loved him as well as they should. As their provider, his leadership had allowed them sustenance of life. He shuffled forward, his elbows sideswiping the guards ahead as they stopped.
Move, I say!
The guards and the surrounding mass froze. He immediately reached for the remote and pushed the buttons, but nothing happened.
What is this? It is justice.
He turned but saw no one.
Who said that? You don't look well, Steve. A bit heavy, and oh, so old. Where are you? Does it matter?
He moved around the guards and checked the crowd as he rushed back to the platform. Shielding his eyes, he gazed across their solid faces.
Where are you?
Youthful and exuberant, Milcoski, wearing a beige corduroy jacket and light chinos, emerged from behind the guards. He held another remote in his hands.
You really should have taken better care of yourself, Steve. How did you get here? Actually, I just left the auditorium where I taught your class on subatomic particles. They miss your description of quarks and gluons.
Steve pushed the buttons on his own remote.
What have you done to my control? Your control? Is that all you have to say for yourself? The man who complained that I should help the human condition? Now I stand before the altruistic leader of the galaxy. How generous, Steve. How generous.
Steve started forward but stopped near the stairs. He looked down at Milcoski.
Man does not care about generosity. Oh, shut up, Steve. I could have you killed. I don't think so. You will experience your own magnificence firsthand, said Milcoski. I don't understand. You will. I have to go now. I have my own classes to teach.
With a subtle smile, Milcoski raised his brows and pushed a button on his own remote and disappeared. Steve lunged down the stairs, slipping but quickly stood.
Milcoski!
He wove around the immobilized guards and hurried down the main aisle and frantically pushed the remote buttons. Cursing the doctor, he searched the hall aisle by aisle and finally stumbled back on stage. For the longest time he sat on the stairs and sobbed into his open hands. He mumbled ineffectually as the emotion churned. Weakened, he stood and faced his unmoving subjects. Again he tried the remote, but when it did not function, he hurled it high into the darkness.
I will let you people share my power. I will humble myself, walk among you. Give me the chance. I will prove it. I've learned I was wrong to hold so much power.
Wiping the eyes, he wandered down the stairs and retrieved the remote. He punched the buttons as he ascended to his gold throne. With the remote set in the chair arm, the exalted galactic ruler buried his head in his hands. Like opening a door into a sports stadium, wild cheering instantly shook the hall. He raised his head. The guards moved and held back his subjects. A gradual smile filled his place. He stood and raised his hands to the sky dome. The room quieted as they awaited his words.
I am the exalted ruler. Worship me. Worship me.
In My Image by Robert P. Fitton. The warehouse punch clock clicked past 5 p.m. Kluger, cigar pinched between his teeth, tapped his short, hairy fingers on the gray metal.
Come on, this thing must be stuck.
Stevie yelled from the side office and Kluger turned.
What are you waiting for, Christmas? Merrill isn't paying overtime.
Kluger squinted and puffed the cigar until it glowed red.
Busted my arse all afternoon, cutting down brush outside, getting ready to have the minimum wage guys clean them paint vats. I want out. I got things to do at home.
Then punch out. I'd like to there, sport. The clock took his punch card. Our new great leader told me to wait without pay. Stevie shuffled papers on his desk and stood. He grabbed his briefcase and punched out ahead of Kluger. You don't answer to Herbert Frederick. Old man Merrill hired him to clean up this paint factory. Kluger leaned against the clock, but I think the bastard has it in for me. Frederick has it in for everyone. Good night. Yeah, see you, Stevie. Stevie moved down the narrow hall and pushed the outside glass door. As the door closed, Kluger heard the sharp click of Frederick's Galliani imported shoes hitting the staircase treads, and his sickening cologne followed him upstairs. Why would anyone stuff a silk handkerchief all fluffed up like a flower into his suit coat pocket? Frederick arched his back, his long, slender nose pointed slightly skyward, and his lips pushed out as if he were going to kiss himself. Kluger, what are you doing dilly-dallying here? Kluger raised his bushy brows. Frederick, you told me to wait for you. Mr. Frederick, I gotta get home. My wife is waiting. Too bad. Please extinguish that filthy cigar. It's making me quite nauseated. Kluger stared at him, yanked the stub from his mouth, and dropped it into the sand bucket. He moved toward Frederick like a fighter about to begin the first round. You don't hear me telling you to get rid of that perfume you're wearing. Dear, dear Kluger, so set in his crude and rigid ways. He removed a neatly folded computer sheet from his inner pocket. What the hell is that? This, Kluger, is a systematic and rigorous study of your work habits. The evaluation and performance standard is, to say the least, lacking. Kluger stepped near his cologne-reeking face. Look, college boy, I worked here for the last 16 years. I know this factory inside and out. I don't need you coming in here and telling me what to do. A slow smile crossed Frederick's smooth face. I have the full backing of Mr. Merrill. If you value your job, you will do things my way. Bullshit to you and your phony report. Frederick unfolded the paper and placed it in Kluger's hands. Blood rushed to Kluger's cheeks as he tightened his facial muscles. Frederick's report accused him of dawdling on the job and costing the company thousands per month. Too much time talking to fellow employees. Work quotas not on time. I tell you, this is all bullshit. The tip of the iceberg, Kluger. I ain't no robot. We're not all perfect like you. I demand peak efficiency, Kluger, and I will get it. He handed Kluger a second sheet of paper. I've established, using my extensive business knowledge and foresight, a document of rules and regulations. You will follow these rules to the letter. Kluger glanced at the numbered regulations. No talking except on specific breaks? You gotta be shitting me. What the hell is this work quota? Can't do all this work in 8 hours. You will or find employment elsewhere. You can't fire me, big man. He shoved the papers into Frederick's chest. You're bluffing. I have the power to ruin you, Kluger. Kluger wondered whether old man Merrill had really given Frederick so much power. Listen, I have a wife and 4 kids. Then I suggest that you toe the mark. Report to work 15 minutes early, unpaid, of course. Get my coffee going and put the Wall Street Journal on my desk. You're a son of a... Now, Kluger, he said, grinning and raising his index finger. Secondly, you will be required to work till 6 p.m. with no overtime benefits since you are technically in management. You can't do this. Kluger clamped his fist and cocked his arm. Go ahead, Kluger. I sense you don't have the nerve to hit me. You need your paycheck to keep that tenement roof over your head. You'll pay for this. Kluger started down the hall to the outside door. I don't think so. He laughed loudly as Kluger grasped the cold doorknob. Everything will be remade in my image, and you will work tonight or be fired. Kluger's body tensed and his head throbbed as he trudged to the punch clock. Frederick's high-pitched voice tugged at his frayed nerves. He was just tired enough to lose control and punch Frederick's face into a bloody mess. I've worked hard every day for the last 16 years. I am touched by your devotion. Tonight I have scheduled you to clean the paint vats. I can overlook your low output if you scour the vats. I'm a supervisor. My job isn't to... Your job is what I say it is. He placed another computer sheet in Kluger's hands. This is yesterday's report. You didn't punch out, and we have quotas here that have not been completed. Kluger inhaled and grit his teeth. He shred the report with his bare hands and threw the pieces into the air. That's enough. I, of course, have other copies on the disk. You, Kluger, are on probation. You bastard. Kluger hooked his clenched fist into Frederick's jaw, lifting him upward. Frederick buckled at the knees and his eyes rolled as he hit the cement. Kluger stood over him with both fists locked tight. Get up. Frederick's blue eyes slowly opened and he focused. When he smiled this time, his deep laugh shook the room. His eyes spun and the whites formed a buzzing red mass of conflicting internal energy. Kluger backed up toward the plant doors and then hit the doors at a full run. He leaped down the stairs. The high metal frame shelving above was packed with paint pallets stacked to the corrugated roof. His heart revved out of control as he ran, his mind fixated on Frederick's blazing eyes. He thought the energy some kind of trick, and then Frederick's voice modulated off the gray cylinder walls. Kluger! Kluger! All the doors are locked, Kluger! Kluger looked over his shoulder and ducked down a side aisle. In the silent warehouse, he shuffled back across the dust-covered cement, squatted, and hid in the shadows. Maybe the voice was a PA system, and the trick with the eyes designed to scare him out of his job. He leaned his head against the metal support, but something creaked and slid above him. Plastic-wrapped paint buckets stacked on a pallet tilted. He rolled to his left as the paint careened over the shelf and burst apart on the cement, spraying green paint globs over his work clothes. Murderer! What's the matter, Kluger? Job got you down? Fluorescent light tubes along the metal ceiling flickered like lightning in a violent thunderstorm. He could slip outside if he climbed the warehouse stairs beyond the stacks. Instead, he crawled under the stacks and into the next aisle. Checking above, he raced by the huge paint vats and toward the outside office stairs along the wall to his left. He glanced back at the shelving as he grabbed the banister and started up the plastic stair treads. The upper fluorescent light tubes pulsed like a strobe light over the spacious warehouse. He slowed and stopped when he saw Frederick sitting alone on the metal stacks. You're going to die, Kluger. Thinking of You by Robert P. Fitton. Koppel hated the ubiquitous Hubric. He watched the freighter move through dead space. Green lantern beacons pulsed at intervals along its extensive hull, and the rear engine cones were masked in a brilliant crimson glow. Under the Hubric's watchful eye, it was Koppel's job to monitor the canisters in the cargo bays. He plugged the computer into the console data jack. His head, shaved and covered with a blue healing patch, still ached. Although he had refrained from taking the pain easer, he now shook the vial of orange liquid and poured it quickly down his throat. His station readings were complete and the yellow letters flashed on the computer screen. Freighter Praktiken. Register 6833109222. Mission Earth Ponds Mining Station number 7. Space Colony 10, duration 45 days, 3 hours, 15 minutes. Cargo bay pressure 34 to 35, canisters 112 to 115. He closed his eyes while the pain easer kicked in. The mission was finally nearing its completion. Fleet Command had ordered Koppel to join the Praktiken because he had expertise with the Hubric and the canisters, but Wooden failed to give him due respect. Koppel hated Wooden. He scanned down the bays for the Hubric and focused on the forward viewer. The communications transmission had overridden the screen's image. Commander Wooden talked with the commissioner of SC-10, and in the lower right-hand corner, the countdown clock ticked away the seconds. 2 hours, 5 minutes, 22 seconds.
Commander Wooden, you have responsibilities as skipper of the Praktiken. but I am responsible for the lives of 18 million people.
Wooden pointed at him.
You're being over-anxious, Commissioner.
Why do you say that?
Asked the commissioner.
We have cut speed to hyperlight and we're decelerating.
This colony is operating on minimal power, Commander. Without the Crontium, we have no power. This is a colony, not a planet.
As I told you throughout this voyage, Fleet will take care of this. Whether you like it or not, it will be another 2 hours before we reach you.
The commissioner paused.
Well, you understand my concern.
Please, Commissioner, we've come this far. Just relax.
Koppel deactivated the monitor. His head still ached. Then he heard the Hubric speak from behind.
Your hatred of Wooden may interfere with your assignment.
Koppel spun around. He stood and looked up at the lean robot's black shell. Its transparent round head and larger-than-human skull pulsed with red and orange thoughts. When it scanned his mind, its impulses froze green and red. I didn't ask for your opinion, Hubric. Its impulses slowed and stopped. And I don't need you reading my mind again.
Evaluation of vessel personnel is my primary function. I must evaluate and assist.
Look, I disagree with Fleet Command's new policy. Humans should perform human tasks. Koppel then concentrated. So, leave me alone and don't read my thoughts. The Hubric rotated on its glide base and hummed out of the console area. Koppel climbed the grid catwalk and leaned over the railing. The Hubric sped past rows of towering orange canisters. Stay away from me. Wooden hovered over the security monitor. He looked up at his navigator and engineer.
Fleet Command has sent us a so-called expert
Who can't take the strains of a space voyage.
Look how he treats the Hubric,
said the engineer. Oh, come on, Callahan, said Marcia. The man's been injured. Wooden looked at his navigator.
Maybe you've grown a little too fond of our guest, Marcia.
You really can't blame Koppel. Ever since the accident, Callahan took 2 steps toward her.
2 of my men died in that accident.
Wooden made a sour face in the console chair. How can you say the Hubric was responsible for that scaffolding breaking?
He wasn't. Ever since Koppel's come on board, he's giving me nothing but static. And I'm not in the mood for static, no sir. We're going to deliver those Crontium canisters to SC-10.
Marcia spoke in a low voice as she gazed back at Wooden. Crontium is very dangerous.
Please, maybe a half-century ago when there were no refining techniques,
said Callahan. No, I've read the discs. Instruments going wild, machinery failing, entire fleets disappearing into deep space.
Well, I don't believe wild stories from the edge of the galaxy, Marcia, said Wooden. 2 hours and the voyage is over. I've got a mind to put a security watch on Koppel right now.
Marcia headed down the staircase and turned before she went down. Then you better watch me too, Commander. 1 hour, 56 minutes, 54 seconds. The pain throbbed inside Koppel's head. He finished his rounds, collecting the raw data from all the console stations. In less than 2 hours, he would leave Wooden and the rest of the Praktiken's crew behind. He sat at the last power station console and watched the blue digits moving downward on the countdown clock. John? He spun in the chair and saw Marcia's bright blue eyes and fluffy brown hair. Oh, God, I thought it was that damn Hubric again. How's your head? She studied the bandage. Okay, I'll get some attention on SC-10, but that Hubric, I feel like Wooden has him watching and thinking my every move. Has Fleet gone completely insane with these things? You still think the Hubric was responsible for that scaffold accident, don't you? Koppel nodded. He sat back in the chair and checked his readings. Marcia, the Hubric was on the catwalk. I saw him, circuits surging in his head just before it happened. He read my mind. He saw those 2 men fall into the canisters, and then I slipped. John, we're almost at SC-10. Did Wooden send you down here? No. You must think I'm cracking. The Hubric appeared near the shiny green fuel pods across the room. Shootout at Coldwater Canyon by Robert P. Fitton. Linda touched the mascara brush to her eyelid as the elevator doors parted. Jack's fat frame squeezed inside. "Good morning, Jack."
Where the hell is Guinness? It's 5 minutes to 8 and he's not in the elevator? Guinness is always such a precise bastard.
"Oh, good old Elmer Guinness," said Linda. "I'll tell you what he needs." "Hey, who's Elmer Guinness?" asked Andy from the 15th floor. Jack looked at Linda.
"You don't know Elmer Guinness? Quiet little Elmer, who leaves his mother's house exactly at 6:45 every morning," said Jack. "Walks like a geek with his briefcase to the bus. He don't even own a car."
Linda finished her mascara. "He's a little guy with thinning hair, brown speckled glasses. Confidentially, I think he's got some kind of syndrome."
"What are you, a psychiatrist or something?" asked Jack.
"Screw you, Jack."
Touchy! What side of someone's bed did you get up on this morning?"
"That's for me to know and for you not to find out." Jack wedged his round belly between Andy and the wall.
"The problem with Guinness is he can't take a joke. When I put that centerfold on his hard drive, he went wild."
"His face was bright red," said Linda. "Right, Jack?"
Jack's belly laugh was muffled by the tiny elevator. "Oh, yeah. Old Guinness was pretty miffed."
"I can't wait to see what happens on the company vacation. Are you going, Andy?" she asked and started filing her nails. The elevator slowed at the 15th floor. "What's the name of the place, Jack? Yestertimes?" "I think you mean yesteryear," said Andy. "Supposed to recreate the Old West. Sure, I'm going, but about time this company paid for something."
"I'll get Guinness good this time."
"Well, maybe he won't go," said Andy, walking outside.
"He'll go, buckaroo," said Jack.
"What have you got planned, Jack?" asked Linda as the doors closed.
"Oh, I ain't telling you."
He moved toward her and brushed his stomach against her dress. "Get the hell away from me, will you, Jack?"
"Well, you can't blame a guy for trying."
She produced a coy smile. "Not here. Later." Elmer carried the printout from the back office, but slowed when he saw Jack and Linda move out of the elevator. His stomach muscles tightened, and he was not sure if he should retreat into the office. Linda always moved her form-fitting skirt seductively when she approached him. Elmer waited for the low, sultry voice and heavy, dark eyes. "Hi, Elmer." "What an unexpected pleasure, Linda." He smiled tenuously as he shifted his weight from foot to foot as her full-scented perfume surrounded him. She ran her finger along his bow tie. "I was just wondering, Elmer." "Wondering?" "Yes. I was wondering if there's a swimming pool at Yesteryear." Jack leaned his pudgy face around the filing cabinet. "I wanted to try out some of my new swimsuits." I don't know anything about swimsuits. Swimsuits and pools, I don't." "You are going on the trip." She adjusted his glasses and puckered her lips. "Aren't you, Elmer?" I believe I am. History and the Old West are favorite subjects of mine." "That's nice." She flung her coat over her shoulder and started back to her alcove. Elmer slowly moved his eyes on her swaying torso. As she turned, he looked away quickly. Somebody bumped Jack near the filing cabinet as they passed. Jack held the man by the suspenders and shook him.
"Hey, watch where you're going."
"What did I do?"
"Nobody pushes Jack Caulfield."
"Jack Ballfield," Elmer muttered under his breath. Jack slammed the man against the metal cabinet.
"Don't let it happen again."
Jack dragged his fingers through his moose-dirty blonde hair. As he turned, Elmer popped back into his office. His heart beating loudly, Elmer moved by his computer to the window. The traffic was heavy on the George Washington Bridge. Driving in traffic was always so stressful. Life moved too fast. The tension built within his temples. Despite the teasing from his fellow workers, he was looking forward to the weekend and his time at Yesteryear. Farnsworth's velvet white hair contrasted with his robust frame. His blue knitted blazer and white turtleneck promoted a relaxed appearance, but his accent elevated his persona as owner and guide of yesteryear.
Mr. Bennett's company has been invited to yesteryear. As your time here progresses, I dare say you will ask yourselves where fantasy begins and reality ends.
Jack leaned past Elmer and cupped his hand into Linda's ear.
Sure, we were invited. Pay the big bucks, you get invited.
Farnsworth stepped past Mr. Bennett on the boardwalk and moved toward the stagecoach.
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't hear exactly what you said.
Jack rubbed his mouth.
Well, were you referring to the fee that I charge your company?
Asked Farnsworth.
Well, yeah, you're making a killing.
Farnsworth nodded and pursed his lips slightly as he returned to the front of the saloon.
Money's paid only go to the maintenance of yesteryear.
Jack looked at Linda and rolled his eyes.
Oh, bullshit.
Farnsworth folded his arms.
I would only ask that while you're here, you observe one simple rule.
Yeah, tip the owner, said Andy, looking for Jack's approval.
Yeah, that's a good one, Andy, a good one. My rule is simple. Do unto others as you would want done unto you. I knew this guy had some kind of religious thing here. You know, the non-profit for taxes,
said Jack. He slapped Elmer on the back.
Right, Guinness?
Elmer exhaled quickly and answered in a raspy voice. Right, Jack. Farnsworth paused at the saloon doors.
Now, I will see you all for brunch. Please join me before the experience begins.
Farnsworth disappeared through the swinging half doors. Elmer lingered while the others filed into the old saloon. He peered down the dusty main road toward the mountains. This town was only 20 miles outside the city, but he didn't see anything modern. The cow punches were sweaty and dirty, and the horses drank from weathered troughs along the boardwalk. He picked up his plaid suitcase and walked alone on the boardwalk. A buffet table was spread before the bar, and Jack held a plate loaded with donuts. Linda giggled as Jack waited at the coffee pot. She whispered something to Jack when Elmer moved closer. He waved Elmer forward.
Hey, Guinness, down here. Come here, the coffee's fresh.
I could use a cup of coffee.
Good.
Elmer walked by the cold cuts and donuts and set his suitcase on the floor as everyone scattered. Jack stood with his cup of coffee and donuts with Linda by the bar. Elmer took out one of the styrofoam cups and placed it under the coffee spigot. He pulled the lever and the steamy black liquid twisted into the cup. The lever seemed loose and he pushed it back, but the coffee kept pouring into the cup.
Oh my God!
The cup overflowed. Coffee spread over the plastic tablecloth and cascaded onto the wood floorboards.
Help me! Help me!
Guinness, what the hell are you doing?
Asked Mr. Bennett from behind.
It's stuck, Mr. Bennett.
Oh, really, Guinness? He stepped over to the coffee puddles and fiddled with the lever.
I am so sorry.
Jack, half-bitten donut in his hand, had fallen into a side chair and was laughing. Everyone was laughing.
You did this, Jack.
Maintenance people in Western garb raced from the back room and tilted the silver coffee urn upward. Other people appeared with mops, and Elmer stormed over to Jack.
What's the matter, Guinness? You ordered the endless cup of coffee?
You really annoy me, Jack.
Oh,
said Jack, turning down his mouth.
I annoy him.
This was not my fault.
Elmer turned. His suitcase sat in a lake of coffee. He ran forward but slipped. He could hear Jack's deep laugh behind him as he looked up at Mr. Bennett.
I am not going to put up with him any more.
What are you babbling about, Guinness? Coffee dripped from the bottom of his suitcase. He closed his eyes briefly and stomped outside. When he reached the boardwalk, he hit the suitcase against the wood several times. Farnsworth emerged from the salon.
Are you all right, Mr. Guinness?
I think so,
he said, brushing the coffee from his shirt.
A dirty trick.
Yes, Jack is noted for his dirty tricks.
Retaliate.
Oh, no, I don't believe in violence of any kind. If I act violent or retaliate, I'm no better than he is.
Farnsworth nodded.
Surely there are times when you must meet evil forces head on.
I have to work with these people. I have to roll with the punches.
Why? I agree we all have roles to play, and I agree violence is not always the answer. You're in a rut. Rolling with the punches is hazardous to your health.
It is?
Yes, I'm glad you're here. Very glad indeed.
Elmer, in new white chaps and a black and white fuzzy vest, leaned back on the bench across from the hotel. He positioned himself behind a wood porch support. Jack fit tightly into his dark pants, leather vest, and black shirt, and he placed his boot on the boardwalk. He dragged the spur along the wood and laughed. Ha ha! Then he adjusted his dark Stetson and drew his gun. Andy opted to don the garb of the town's lawyer and checked his pocket watch at the end of a long gold chain. They both turned as Linda and a few of her girlfriends walked from the hotel dressed as saloon girls with low-cut, bright satin dresses and wide-curled hair. Jack pointed toward Elmer. He walked ahead of the others as if he were going to draw his gun. Elmer stood and backed up against the barber-shop window. When Jack reached the edge of the boardwalk, he quickly yanked out a pearl-handled gun from his side holster.
Bang, bang, Guinness!
"Draw your gun, Elmer," said Linda. Elmer fiddled with the long-handled gun, finally lifting the heavy weapon up, but Jack pointed his gun. Liquor reeked on his breath, and his eyes were already bloodshot.
You better practice your draw, boy. Bang, bang!
"He's a little late," said Linda, placing her hand on her hip. Elmer tried not to stare at her propped-up breasts. Jack pretended to blow smoke out his barrel.
Story of his life. Hey, Guinness, you look like a cow in that vest. Pink shirt, pretty tough.
You all think you're so funny.
Linda moved next to him and put her arm around him. "You want to be my date, Elmer?" "Date?" he asked, swallowing. Farnsworth in his blue blazer and white turtleneck appeared behind the post.
I hope you will all find the accommodations here realistic. Sure scared the hell out of Guinness, said Jack. Imagine yourselves not in New York, but on the high plains of Wyoming Territory, 1869. Jack put his weapon back in the holster. Slick, real slick, Farnsworth. Excuse me? Fire your guns, blanks, of course. Remember that, Guinness. I know how trigger-happy you can be. Believe me, you really are back in 1869.
Jack waited until Farnsworth had walked out of sight around the adjacent building.
1869, my ass. You can still see the radio tower out there on the hill.
Elmer adjusted his glasses and squinted. The narrow red and white tower extended skyward atop the rounded hill behind the church.
Then don't look at it.
You telling me what to do, Guinness?
Jack drew his gun again.
Bang, bang, bang!
Who, me? A ruddy, leather-skinned man in a brown shirt and tarnished badge walked briskly across the dirt. He grabbed Jack by the arm and pulled him back.
What seems to be the trouble here? And who the hell are you? Asked Jack. Will Jarvis. I'm the marshal of this town. Yeah, and I'm President Clinton.
Funny you don't look like President Clinton, said Andy. Sweep the Sweeper by Robert P. Fitton. Mike released the bowling ball and it slid swiftly down the waxed wood alley, spinning and twisting toward the pins. The sweeper moved above the pins and stopped long enough to block the ball. Great. As if my life hasn't fallen apart enough without a dumb thing like this. That was a strike. Tough luck, Mike, said Tony from the scores table. Yeah, tough luck. Mike pushed the button next to the racked bowling balls, but the sweeper remained stuck. He started down the alley and his friends called back from the bench. Mike couldn't care less about what people said ever since Jody died. He reached the end of the alley and had one foot in the gutter as he grabbed the sweeper. Dislodging it would be easy if he just shook it. Voices echoed from behind the wall.
Sweep the sweeper. Sweep the sweeper.
The Last Rites of Dottie O'Leary by Robert P. Fitton. Wingate blocked the entrance and pointed at Carpin. "You're in serious trouble, Mr. Carpin." "Do you know who the hell I am?" "I'll tell you who I am. I own Underwood Industries. I worked my way up from being a stock boy." He glanced at the Magic Heavens marquee and then winked at his bleach-blonde wife. Wingate nodded. "You can come peacefully to answer a few questions, or I will get the necessary orders." "You don't scare me, mister. I've got a team of lawyers that will tear you to mincemeat. You can't prove anything." His wife took his arm and grimaced at the plain-clothes officer as they headed inside. When they reached the lobby, she leaned toward Carpin. "Rick, they have the body. He knows we did it." "That was 30 years ago, Rita." Carpin smiled at the hotel manager moving from his office. "The statute of limitations for murder never runs out, Rick." "Ah, Mr. and Mrs. Carpin, what a pleasure to see you." Carpin looked at the revolving doors. Wingate and his men had left the hotel. "I am Mr. Harland." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Harland. Tell me about Magic Heaven. We've heard nothing about it." "We have procured the finest magic acts in the world, in 6 separate showrooms decorated in a Bavarian motif. All are dedicated to the art of prestidigitation. I assure you, you will not be disappointed." He escorted them to the elevators. A prodigious black top hat surrounded the far elevator. "Well, Dick never takes the elevator." "I'm sorry, this is the only entrance to Magic Heaven." Carpin nodded and moved his hands. "All right, let's go. I want to see this place." "Good, good." When Harlan pushed a red button between the elevators, a polyester rabbit popped up from a smaller hat. Harlan took out a membership card and stuck it in the rabbit's mouth as if it were an ATM machine. The elevator door, a simulated silver guillotine, moved upward. "Clever, very clever." Carpin walked inside with Rita, but as he turned, the guillotine crashed down, and he did not see Harlan. "Well, where the hell is he?" "I thought I saw him walk in here." The elevator, lined with gold-grain mirrors and an ornate red wallpaper, moved downward. "Magic Heaven is supposed to be in the penthouse." Carpin took out his cell phone. "Oh, we got other problems." "Wingate didn't travel 3,000 miles for the hell of it." "Who are you calling?" "Russell Medeiros. We'll come clean with him. Tell him we killed O'Leary and we stuffed your body under the freight elevator at Kirshner's. Have him and his people handle any legal issues." "Why admit to anything, Rick?" He shook his cellular. "No signal. Great." The elevator stopped abruptly, throwing him against the mirrors. A maroon velvet curtain brushed against the rising guillotine. Carpin was afraid to walk under the blade. "Rick, we could end up in jail, or worse." "We're not going anywhere. We have enough money to get out of this." He moved near the curtain. "Hello out there." "We were just kids working in a department store. That old woman kept taunting us." She taunted everybody, Rita. I'm telling you, don't worry." Curtain rolled upward. 2 men in black tuxedos escorted them past a bar and up the red-carpeted stairs to an exclusive dining and show area. They were seated in the VIP section in front of a table. On stage, a magician finished his card routine and the crowd applauded as he moved behind the black silk curtain. The master of ceremonies walked out on stage. "Thank you, Carl and the magic cards. Our next act comes to us from Las Vegas and has been seen nationally for many years. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the great Franchesco." "I've seen this guy on cable," said Carpin. As the room broke into a thunderous applause, the waitress set drinks on the table, and Carpin quickly raised his glass to his lips. "Cheers!" The lights dimmed in the midst of a long drum roll, and the room went dark as a quick explosion flashed center stage. A green spotlight shone through the haze, and a Latin man with a goatee and hypnotic eyes passed through the smoke. He swung his black cape, and his blonde assistant materialized from the darkness. Franchesco, billed as the master of illusion, produced doves from colorful handkerchiefs, mended broken ropes into a single strand, and finally thrust a sword through a box containing his assistant. Rita chain-smoked cigarettes as Carpin downed straight whiskey. Several times he tried to make a cellular connection, but was out of range, and placed the phone back in his pocket. Franchesco's accent boomed throughout the dining room.
I need volunteers from the audience. 2 people who are not afraid to wander across the limits of the finite. 2 people who are not afraid to leave the confines of their earthly existence through the power of the black door.
The assistant rolled a simple 2-dimensional black door across the stage as Franchesco held his fingertips to his temples and fell into a deep trance, rolling the whites of his eyes. Then he gazed into the audience as if he were picking up vibrations from the spirit world.
I sense a man and a woman for the final act. Carpin!
This is the oldest damn trick in the book, Rita, said Carpin. Franchesco pointed through the green light to Carpin.
You!
No, thank you. Carpin motioned the assistant back, but she pulled Rita up. The applause started, and he reluctantly followed her on stage. This is bullshit.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Franchesco will now attempt a feat never before performed on any stage,
said the assistant. Carpin stood with Rita in front of the black door. The assistant opened the door and walked through 3 times. Franchesco faced the audience.
Nothing behind and nothing above. At the present, this is a conventional door.
Franchesco stood across the stage, fingers at his temples as the assistant moved back onto the edge of the stage.
The great Franchesco requests the room be silent as he opens the world beyond the shadows.
The room lights darkened and a single, crisp spotlight shone across the door. Franchesco, barely visible, spoke in a deeper, almost amplified voice from the stage.
Concentrate. We must all concentrate. It is inevitable that everyone passes through the door. Those who would enter for many reasons through the door. The door. The door. The door.
Carpin chuckled. Very effective, I'll give him that. As he turned, Franchesco's cape spread through the air again. His cold and dark eyes seemed to hover away from his body as the black door slowly opened on its own accord.
Enter! Enter! Enter!
Carpin smiled, took Rita's hand, and walked forward. Just how Franchesco would create this illusion would prove interesting. They moved into the murky air and the door closed quickly behind them. Now they stood in total darkness. This guy is the biggest phony I've ever seen in my life, Rita. He felt his way along the wall slats, not there a few seconds ago. How the hell did he do that?
Rick, I'm scared.
Franchesco, we can't see anything. Carpin continued along the wall. The area had a dusty, aged odor. Okay, Franchesco, you've done your magic trick. Now take your bows and bring us back to the table. The magician's voice echoed around them.
You will not be going back to the table.
Do you know who I am? Asked Carpin.
I know exactly who you are and what you have done. Time may pass, but we all must pay the price of our actions. Die Holly Seltz Adarik.
Rita grabbed her husband. Oh, dear God! How would he have known those words? Shut up, Rita. Carpin stopped. Hey, Franchesco! That's what Dottie O'Leary said after you swung the axe into her head, Rick. A very clever man who has somehow listened to our private conversations. I'll tell you one thing, Franchesco. You won't get away with it.
Neither will you, Mr. Carpin. Neither will you.
In the darkness, Carpin remembered how O'Leary, as the supervisor at Kirshner's, had unceasingly harassed them, accusing them of carnal acts while working at the store. He had not meant to kill her as he taunted her with the axe and swung it through the air, but she deserved having her skull cracked. But no one knew about her death. He and Rita had so cleverly buried the body below the freight elevator. Gray light formed around a doorway ahead. Carpin took Rita's hand and pulled her forward. He felt a cool metal doorknob and smiled as he twisted it. Quickly they moved forward into a blaze of light. As the light dimmed, they stood in Kirshner's department store's fourth-floor offices. Rita screamed and held Carpen. She turned toward the metal banister and spindles leading down the stairway to the lower floors. This store was demolished in 1986. Oh, God, Rick, we're dead. We're not dead. He moved past the shelves of dusty, cobwebbed merchandise. Mind control. Clearly he's hypnotized us all, that's all. He'll snap his fingers and it'll be all over. How can we both be here? I don't know, Rita. This is a fancy club. He's paid well. Carpen searched his mind, wondering just how Franchesco had known what O'Leary had said in German before she died. They neared the store offices bathed in a dull white light. As he pushed open the swinging half door near the switchboard, a single red light flashed near the connecting plugs. Carpen moved ahead to the store manager's office and passed the faded wall calendar from November 1966. Family pictures were coated with dust and store reports covered the manager's desk. Carpen ran to the window and pulled back the drapes overlooking Main Street, but only saw a ghostly reflection of himself in the black window. He reached for the desk lamp. We're out of here. What are you doing? I'm going to break that damn window. He yanked out the cord, gripped the heavy brass lamp, and hurled it at the Main Street window. The lamp smacked the surface but bounced back onto the carpet. He retrieved it quickly and hacked the glass until he was drenched in sweat. Ah, screw it. Carpen again squeezed her hand and ran from the office, but he stopped at the switchboard. He stared at the single flashing red light. Slowly he took the headset in his hand and lifted it to his ear. Loud static like a worn vinyl phonograph record and a persistent hiss filled the speaker. He heard footsteps on the other end. Somebody picked up the phone and a shaky old voice crackled into his ears. He ripped off the headset and chucked it against the wall. What was it, Rick? Carpen grabbed her and pushed her through the half door as they ran back into the store. They would have to exit via the stairs or the elevator. In the indistinct light, he stepped into the main aisle and eyed the staircase ahead. Two sinewy, rigid black electrical cords slithered up the stairs and across the vinyl floor. Read Roy's Rites by Robert P. Fitton. Miranda's raven hair flew behind her as she ran across the backland. Her first memories were of this area. Now the colony was nearing the 70 Orpheus system, and the imposing virtuality of Earth, hovering in the dome above her, made her wonder what the new planet would yield. Planetary scans showed no intelligent life on the surface. Odd dreams and the guardian memory irregularities were widespread throughout the colony. At the observation wall, the second colony valley was visible from the surround path. Roy! Roy! Miranda panicked when her guardian lagged behind. Many times lately, Roy could not keep pace. He was with her when she was born and supposed to follow her throughout her life. His high-pitched whistle had alerted her ahead to his presence, and his rounded, reflective body rolled up the pathway. He enunciated every syllable as he spoke.
Your mother will be looking for us. We are not allowed in the second colony without permission.
Oh, you're so human, Roy. For a guardian, that is. In fact, in every way, you're like us. You feel, you think.
That is my design.
Yes, and yet you serve us. What about your feelings, Roy? What do you want?
Guardians have no status. We cannot express our feeling.
Oh, guardians have feelings. I know you do. You have neuropods. Miranda stared across the valley as she spoke. I've always pictured the second colony as 70 Orph.
If you were allowed inside, you would not want to look.
Miranda smiled and tiptoed around the surround path. He placed her fingers on the backland transparency. A central transport track, raised high on support trestles, bisected the tapering green valley. We should all be allowed to enjoy the openness of the second colony, yet here we are, penned within the megacity. Why?
Miranda, you are too young to be speculating about all these things. Soon we will orbit the planet.
I want to know. Please, Roy, please. Roy's woven aqua absorption patches brightened. Please? His voice sounded clearly through the black perforations under his patches. Miranda always believed that a human being lived behind those patches rather than a constructed machine.
The destiny of man left Earth with a charter allowing everyone in the valley.
A charter was written on Earth, said Miranda.
Yes, you are listening during your instruction. You are very bright.
Roy.
This charter provided the guidelines for the journey into space. Our primary purpose is to make contact with new life forms in the 70 Orpheus system. You will see that planet soon.
We will both see it, but Father says the planet harbors no life.
Maybe not, but what is life?
Anything that survives. Like you, Roy. You have substance. Roy turned from the valley and faced her.
Guardians have always been machines for mankind.
How can that be true? You feel, you love, you hate. You've been given those qualities. What do you think, Roy?
It is not for me to say. No one likes a mouthy machine.
Miranda smiled, pushed back her hair, and gazed through the transparency. Nor a diplomatic one either. And I still don't understand why we can't enter the second colony.
That was not the original intent. The backland was an area of rest and peace. But power groups developed over the centuries. Only the elite generally use the valley. The rest of us gawk through the surround wall, wishing we could enjoy the open spaces.
Roy sputtered and his receptors flickered. Roy, are you all right? Are you affected by the planetary approach?
No, that is different. Almost like everyone's bizarre dreams, I fear a shakedown.
What does that mean?
Nothing. I'm all right.
Miranda leaned on the surround wall. The megacity's massive beehive appearance represented confinement. Thousands of windows stared toward the backland as the sun hung low in the dome. The sun is not a reality. I wonder what it's like to have a real sun, a real planet. Maybe 70 Orph is like that. To live on a planet and not pretend to be inside the megacity's virtuality. To escape. Roy, do you wish you could escape yourself?
I don't understand.
Have movement, feeling, love.
I have all those qualities. All guardians do.
But no official status within the colony. Miranda hugged his cold, smooth shell. I love you, Roy.
I love you too, Miranda.
She wished she could get inside and really hug him.
Our time grows short. Your mother will be worried.
Miranda focused on her mother's clear green eyes. Mother, what is a shakedown? Oh, nothing. She at once turned away and went back to the access screen, but Miranda followed her. Roy says the same thing. Her mother looked up from the screen. Sometimes guardians don't always function the way they should, dear. I think you are reaching an age where you will begin to see things as they really are. Is he sick? She placed her hand on Miranda's cheek. Yes. Roy may need to be supplemented with another guardian. No! Tears welled in Miranda's eyes as she backed away. No, how can you say such things? He's my friend. It's your friend. Someone constructed Roy. Someone can fix him. All guardians are supplemented. It's a part of growing up, Miranda. Things change. You'll understand that when you get older. The Ultimate Salesman by Robert P. Fitton. Bailey knew that Nick Piranha could have him fired. He stared out the control tower at the ferocious blizzard sweeping over the airport. Piranha had been pressuring him for the last 45 minutes, and now he had to answer another call. He picked up the red control tower phone. This is Bailey.
Bailey, this is Nick Piranha. I rented this bird, pal. I want it up in the air now. I have an experienced pilot. What's the matter? No balls?
Bailey lit another cigarette and inhaled quickly. Piranha's boisterous voice inflamed an already tricky situation. Mr. Piranha, I can't put people at risk.
You let me worry about that.
Piranha had women on the plane. Bailey could hear them giggling as Piranha himself laughed like a disgruntled cow.
One more call, Bailey, and I can make your life miserable. Now be a man and make the decision.
Bailey exhaled and flipped the radio switch. Captain, you have clearance on runway 6. He could hear Piranha's voice on the plane.
Case closed, problem solved. You don't get to first base with a broad or anywhere else in this life if you don't ask. Tell a guy he has no balls and you have meeting out of your hand.
Bailey shut off the radio and stared at the jet and the snowy runway lights. I just hope you get what the hell you deserve. Piranha checked his perfectly styled black coif. His face had bulged out during the past year, but it was not time to worry about diets. He lifted the drink off the bathroom counter and stepped back into the specially equipped 767. All the seats were removed. The bar, with widescreen TVs and bolted furniture, had transformed the commercial airliner into a flying lounge with adjoining bedrooms. The red-haired Lorna crossed her long legs on the sofa and held up her drink. Come on, Nicky, let's party toward the millennium. Piranha spilled his drink as he moved toward her. Wow, you tell that pilot to fly this thing straight. Piranha puckered his lips and bent over, but he felt his partner's strong grip on his wrist. Hey, Nick, you and I need to talk. Piranha looked up. Hey, can't you see I'm busy, Cliff? This can't wait. It's been too long as it is. Excuse me there, beautiful. Piranha put his arm around Cliff and walked him to the rear bedroom. He flipped on the lights as the plane bounced. Hey, Cliff, never interrupt me with a broad or a good meal. Cliff's face remained sour, and he set his drink on the bureau. You've screwed me for the last time, Nick. Screwed you? What the hell are you talking about? You made a deal with Sun Sensor for all the software rights, and you just left me out of it. Just like you used to screw Oren Kranz out of deals. Didn't you think I'd hear about it? Piranha grinned and raised his glass. I really didn't care if you knew. He downed the liquor and smiled again. You're all done, Cliff. I don't think so. Piranha recoiled when Cliff produced a small handgun and took a step toward him. Listen, you son of a bitch. You pulled a lot of shit since we've been together. I've lost money and I let it go, but now you're cutting me off. You're a dead man, Nick. We're 20,000 feet above the Atlantic. No one will ever find your body. Cliff, you're overreacting. Piranha tried to move forward, but Cliff pushed the gun toward him. I'll include you. No, you won't. And now I'm going to watch you squirm, just like everyone who's gotten in your way. You're a guy that used to sell stereos and transistor radios 20 years ago, but you seem to have forgotten that. The plane hit another level of turbulence, and Cliff lost his footing. With the gun up in the air, he fell back against the wall panels. Piranha rumbled forward and grabbed his wrist. He knocked the gun from Cliff's grasp. Before Cliff could reach out, Piranha had the gun, and with a smirk swung it toward Cliff's head. My past is my past, and you're not going to let me forget it, are you? Go ahead, kill me. Surprised you didn't get me out of the way years ago. Piranha chuckled as he spoke. You got your wish, old pal. He fired once, piercing Cliff's forehead, and his partner hit the wall. Piranha stood over the dead man's stare. He reached into the closet and pulled out one of his clothing bags. Carefully, he surrounded the body and stuffed Cliff's limp frame into the plastic and zipped the side. He was surprised at the minimal amount of blood on the wall panel. Cleanup would be quick and disposal easy. He found himself grinning as he hurried to the adjacent bathroom. The small blood globs on his hands were easily washed clean with faucet water. As he dried his hands on a paper towel and the plane pitched again, he fell forward against the counter. The lights went out and the door slammed. Damn this flight! Simple Millennium Party has to get screwed up? He twisted the slippery knob, but was at first unable to open the bathroom door. Getting Cliff's body out of the plane was critical. He pushed the open door with his shoulder and burst into a stockroom. Shelves were packed with electronic boxes along cinder block walls to the maroon girders above. Holy shit! Piranha spun back to the bathroom but saw his reflection in the dirty mirror of the Audiotronics bathroom from 20 years ago. He loosened his red polyester tie and gawked at his worn button-down shirt and corduroy pants.
Hey, Nick, I need a quad stereo.
Piranha turned as an old man with a striped tie waddled into the back room.
Check and see if another store has it in stock, will you? Elliot? What? This is bullshit. Come on, I got customers waiting out there.
He moved through the swinging doors, and Piranha followed him onto the sales floor. The store at the mall appeared as it had so long ago. Even Elliot, in his baggy brown pants, waited on customers with his usual whining pitch and aggravating voice. Elliot cleaned his glasses on his shirt and made a motion to the phone. Piranha walked along the counter past TV sets with a White House report of Ronald Reagan in the Rose Garden. Crossroads by Robert P. Fitton. Lieutenant Wirtz flipped the sirens, and the flashing blue lights swung across the front yards and houses as he sped back to Brighton Falls. The cruiser air conditioner was not working again, so he rolled down the side window.
Hey, Hank, radio Sam. What I think we need to do is to surround this place in case this guy tries to hurt anyone else.
Hank checked the bright computer screen letters as they raced toward town.
Killed his girlfriend in Arizona, slashed her throat. Why does he want a horse and wagon? Because he's psycho, that's why.
Todd Granger held the podium, paused, and scanned the large auditorium. Hundreds had paid money to listen to his motivation speech, but as he neared the conclusion, he wondered why he was here at all.
Forget our business world. Believe in whatever you do in your life. Without substance, a man has nothing. He runs adrift and is good to no one, even himself. Thank you and good afternoon.
The crowd responded with a standing thunder as Todd waved and walked under his company's purple and white banner. He shook hands perfunctorily and staggered off the stage. His knees weakened and he thought he might collapse.
You look like hell, Todd, said Bruce Williams. I feel like hell.
Todd clutched the side curtain as the applause tapered off.
I need time off. No more speeches. I just want to go home. I'm here against my will. Why am I doing this? You're losing it, Todd. There has to be another way. I tell you, I don't belong here. Todd, get a hold of yourself. This motivational speaking is a gold mine.
Todd, breathing rapidly, scanned the Christmas decorations back in the lobby.
The season for giving, and I'm talking about taking, succeeding in the business world. You diverted from the usual script at the end. Maybe I was talking about myself. Maybe they need to know the truth. This is not where I'm supposed to be.
He stood upright and turned toward the stage.
What are you doing? Going back out there and tell those people what I really think. Don't do that. We'll never get another booking. Good.
Todd emerged from behind the curtain. The people stood around the hall. Some had left through the back exits. Bruce pleaded with him as he pulled the microphone off the stand.
Listen to me.
Heads turned.
We live in an information age where everything comes easily. I submit that we are inundated with useless information. Think about what really matters and not the dribble you are fed. They've made it easy to take in the inconsequential and the manifestations of the profit makers. Give me the simple life.
Bruce walked across the stage and spoke away from the mic.
Todd, they're listening to this. Distances have shriveled. The fast food places have ruined the locales. So have the mega chain stores. It's all homogenized now. Where is small-town America? What happened to the old-fashioned, poignant love songs? Where is their commitment in a transient society? Where is the thought within the passiveness of the media?
Bruce yanked his arm. A low buzz generated in the hall, and the people trickling out looked back inside.
Congratulations, Todd. Word of this outburst will spread.
In our zest for technological excellence, we have bred mediocrity.
He held the microphone to his side and finally dropped it onto the floor as he wept. Bruce took his arm and led him back on the stage. The curtains in the upper ropes above the stage spun and everything dissipated. He lay on his back, and now spread before him in the cold winter air was an undulating white hilly landscape with tiny branches against a pink-silver sky. He was on his way home. Daycare by Robert P. Fitton.
These hands threw touchdown passes at Brown. I'm just an old man. My name is Morris B. Draper, and I'm a human being.
Morris held the side of the armchair, and Clarisse helped him stand.
Now I'm being herded out to pasture. My brain might be a little old, so what? You're looking at the face of a lover, Clarisse, a man who is a top business manager, the son of Albert and Mary Draper. Morris B. Draper, anachronism. Dad, you're 81 years old. Oh, I'm 81 years old, all right. Passed out of the 70s, that's one strike. Lose your wife, that's two strikes. Have a bladder problem and it's time to hit the showers. Burden alert, burden alert. Look, Clarisse, I don't want to go to the nursing home. What I really want to do is go to the bathroom. You're not well? She asked, moving the chrome walker over toward him. I'd like to say I'm well. That is, if you like playing cat and mouse with constipation and diarrhea. Shall I call Dr. Levine? Another prescription, another pill. I need a program guide just for my medication times. Or maybe I just need a laxative. They say that calcium is good for old bones.
Clarisse opened the bathroom door.
Old bones? You're as old as you feel, Dad. Then I must be 750.
What about daycare? They have places you can go for the day and then return here at night.
Clarisse, daycare is for babies.
The senior bus whined toward the ocean flats where Morris had once played as a child. The marsh grasses and reeds looked the same, but someone had built a white pyramid tapered against the blue sky.
When the hell did they put up that building? My sister Evelyn and I used to play with the neighborhood kids out here.
The blue-haired lady next to him giggled.
When was that? Last spring, Morris? Evelyn died 3 years ago. Oh, well, my daughter brings me up here all the time, but I never seen that building.
The bus hummed past more marshes and wetlands. A rabbit scampered across the road, disappearing into the tall grass to the right. Morris knew that Clarisse was only trying to help him, but he had his doubts about being babysat all day. In 8 hours, he'd be home. A few minutes later, the bus driver signaled, and they veered left, up a narrow, faded asphalt lane. Below the towering pyramid, the bus squeezed under a long white canopy and abruptly stopped.
Why doesn't he just use air brakes? Oh, Morris, you're so witty, said Mrs. Faxton. Yeah, I'm witty with whiplash.
The man in a green baseball cap and jumpsuit strutted through the tinted bronze sliding doors. His white hair matched the building facade.
Who the hell is that? I think it's Esperance, said Mrs. Cranston behind him. You know, the gentleman that runs daycare?
Yeah, well, he looks like an astronaut.
You know, when they come back from space.
Esperance rapped on the side window and Morris struggled to turn. He spoke with an accent. Your trip to daycare is long overdue, Mr. Draper.
That beats the bedpan in the nursing home.
Esperance smiled perfectly.
You will not need a bedpan where you are going. Tension and anxiety are things of the past now that you are with us at daycare.
Morris leaned to Mrs. Faxton.
Sounds like they're going to shoot us at sunrise and put us out of our misery. By noon, we'll be at the glue factory.
Morris rolled his eyes when they wheeled him into a complex examining room. All the blinking computers and readout screens and monitors confused him. Esperance stood between a team of medical people in blue operating garb and a row of green vinyl tables.
Is everyone ready?
Now what the hell you doing? Asked Morris.
What is all this? Esperance turned. I'm going to transform your lives. Oh, boy, he's going to get me a man, said Mrs. Cranston. You know, I get enough of this at Dr. Levine's office, and then he sends me to the clinic, said Morris. My technicians will help you at each station. Mrs. Faxon held her wrist and blinked her spacey blue eyes. Oh, Morris, if they're just running tests, they'll probably spot any potential problems. Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. One of the men in the blue surgical suits put his arm under Morris's shoulder. Let me help you on the table, Mr. Draper. Morris said nothing, but his eyes followed the monitor scans and the computer lights along the wall. Getting up on the table was a chore, but a sudden peacefulness migrated through his tired body when he laid back on the soft vinyl. He stared at a wide screen on the ceiling. A proliferating warmth massaged his weary bones. Then he looked at Mrs. Faxon, also horizontal on the adjacent table. This is unbelievable. Very good, said the technician who had helped him up. Across a wide screen, a red outlined image of his body became visible with green and blue detailed depictions of every organ in his body. Each body organ was listed on a side menu and designated with bits of information. Hey, I can see my blood moving through my veins, although I never knew I was a blue blood. That's just a computer's enhancement, said the technician. Esperance's voice came over the speakers within the screen.
I want you all to know there are certain things that occur here at daycare, things that must remain hidden to the outside world. The sensation you will feel shortly will be a simple thought suppression wave.
Morris rolled his head toward Mrs. Cranston. So much for my life as a Casanova. What was that, Morris? Oh, nothing. You can't suppress what's already been suppressed. As he spoke, a numbness swept over him. It was as if he had hyperventilated again and tried to stand. For a moment he thought he might black out, but the feeling actually was enjoyable. Well, isn't this nifty? Esperance's image now hovered on the screen above him.
There, that wasn't difficult, was it? Now, with the procedure completed and all your genetic material mapped, as they say, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Morris looked into the technician's brown eyes. The last time I heard that, Dr. Levine's nurse prepared me for an enema. The technician smiled and helped Morris sit up. He required Morris to stay on the table for at least a minute, then lifted him into the wheelchair. Now where are we going? Esperance stood before the group again. I believe Mr. Draper has asked what's next. We are bringing you wherever you want to go. The choice is yours. Clarisse stood on the front porch when Morris moved out of the van without assistance. The pain in his legs and back had vanished on the vinyl table, but he still did not have the complete mobility of his younger years. As he and Clarisse converged, he had difficulty remembering anything after he was wheeled off the table. Dad, where's your walker? Walker, who needs a walker? Clarisse's green eyes opened wide and she studied him standing on the cement. Dr. Levine said, forget Levine, I feel fine. I haven't seen you move like that since Mom. Well, I'm no marathon runner, but I feel good. Clarisse took his arm, waved at the daycare bus driver, and they started up the porch. Morris quickly climbed the steps. I guess your first day was good. Good? I feel great. I never felt better. What did you do? She opened the aluminum storm door and Morris strutted by her and into the foyer. I'll never tell. She spoke from behind as he moved into the kitchen. Nothing funny happened down there, did it, Dad? Oh, what do you mean, hanky-panky? Yeah, that's exactly what I mean, said Clarisse. At my age? Come on, Clarisse. The only thing that comes up in my body is the last meal I ate. Did they give you a drug or... No, of course not. I just had a good time. Maybe it's the answer to old age, Clarisse. Instead of sitting around and talking about everything you did in your life, maybe you should just keep living it. There's too many people, myself included, who are fond of talking about the past, like some record over and over. I say live it. Clarisse took his medication bottles from the windowsill. As she moved toward the refrigerator, Morris tried to sift the preceding few hours through his mind, but he could remember nothing except feeling very good. She poured the orange juice into a small flowered breakfast glass and handed it to him. "Are you sure you're all right?" "I never felt better." Morris lay in bed and looked over his bifocals as Clarisse poked her head in the doorway. "Dad, it's 11:30. When's the last time you stayed up this late?"
"Hell, I don't know."
She crossed the room in her gray bathrobe and stared at the book. "What are you reading?"
"I'm reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William S. Shirer. I thought I'd like to reread it."
"That book is over 1,000 pages.
"Actually, it's over 1,200. I suppose I should get some rest before the bus picks me up at 7.
Clarisse nodded and sat on the edge of the bed. "I think that would be the prudent course."
"I'm so happy you signed me up at daycare."
"Can't believe the change. I'm just baffled." Morris grasped her hand on the blanket.
"Remember, Clarisse, never question serendipity. You might lose it."
The Village by Robert P. Fitton, Part 1. Ending meant the forced cessation of biological life, but simulation continued forever. Rawlings knew all that when he heard the unnerving news from his endings division. A seasoned village security officer such as Conrad was not prone to outlandish theories, yet the reports of tampering with medical ending scans involving 6 village citizens would mean a larger investigation. He sat in the air sweeper's forward section and gazed out over the rugged mountain slopes in what used to be Colorado and was now Sector 15. The sweeper was still 15 minutes from the village. Unlike most of the 17 million village inhabitants, Rawlings enjoyed shutting off the imager inside his brain and experiencing life the old-fashioned way, just using his brain's perception. Today was a productive day. He and his men, along with 12 drogues, had successfully deported and relocated an accumulation of 52 outsiders who had illegally entered the village. People on the outside would always wish entry into the superior village lifestyle. He couldn't blame them for trying, but why not take the legal route and apply in advance for temporary entry? With the proper behavior, full village citizenship would eventually be invested. Judging the motives of illegal entries was not his job. He was an inspector in the village's Denver section. Once he retired, he would choose whether to go to the outside, where he had spent his youth, or remain inside the village and undergo image-provided realities for the rest of his days. The medical tampering accusation bothered him enough to open a channel to the village. Without actually being inside, he couldn't activate his imager and direct communications to his brain. A 2-dimensional image would have to suffice. He summoned Conrad. The block-faced Conrad popped on the screen several seconds later. He was always unshaven and his red overlap coat wrinkled. Rawlings' image fed into Conrad's brain imager, and he smiled, lifting his double chin high above his tight red neck shirt.
"Harold, you couldn't resist calling me about the tampering, could you?"
Rawlings raised his wiry eyebrows and smiled. If this were the 20th century, he'd probably be adjusting a long-stemmed pipe, as he thought. He liked pipes and used them in his imaging simulations inside the village. That was the harm of retiring on the outside. Real-life pipe smoking would endanger his health. Why would anyone want to change medical records for those people who wish to terminate their lives?
"Well, I've been asking myself that ever since I noticed the pattern. I don't think we're readily going to get that answer."
Rawlings shook his head and watched the treetops whipping under the sweeper. That wasn't the answer he wanted to hear. He squinted as he thought. Maybe it was a malfunction. Purposefully altering termination medical scans made no sense. Every villager had the choice to end his own life. "John, I want those scans in my imager when I get back to the village." Conrad smiled and his lower chin rippled like waves across the waters.
"For a man who's not going to get involved in this investigation..."
"Maybe it's time I do get involved, John. I'll image you when I'm done. Thanks for your hard work."
"I know if I stayed around long enough, I'd stumble into some significant case, Harold."
Rawlings nodded and ended the transmission. A malfunction could be traced to the mainstream. The mainstream controlled everything, and creating their intelligence was as significant a human achievement as imaging. Every village city had a secure area below the surface for mainstream control. The mainstream coordinated the environment, all imaging, the archives, and information. Those who created the early computers would be astounded by the realm of intelligence contained within each mainstream. The likelihood of the mainstream, so sophisticated and highly evolved, making a mistake was impossible. From high above the mountains, the village, 1,000 meters high at the apex, assumed the shape of a sleeping creature in the wilderness. Glossy black perforated stripes, containing tube transits, walkways, and energy collectors, tapered down the sloping beige strucrete. Rawlings thought the village resembled the top of a skull embedded in the forest valley. He stood and walked over to the very large window span as the sweeper circled. At night, the village's upper linear buildings along a 15-kilometer apex was the only illumination in the valley. Other sweepers and aircraft waited to land. He headed to the drogue section near his personal cabin. Having lived the first 21 years of his life on the outside, Rawlings marveled how the drogues piloted ships. Drogues served humanity, subordinated within a 4x5-inch frame and a generic voice. "Drogue, how long is the delay?" The voice exited the front speakers.
"Delay is 15 minutes.
"Thank you." Drogues appeared alive, but were actually powered by long-range boosters. Complex internal pathways carried pulses quickly, yet the higher abstract-level thinking eluded them. A human-shaped pliable shell was colored to the particular city they served. The Denver drogues were a heightened green. While the village humans hid implanted image mesh under the skull, the drogues' transparent skulls were laced with black transmitting mesh. Fuzzy vermilion eyes glowed when they focused, and green indefinite-edged auditory receptors appeared in place of human ears. For over 100 years, the villagers accepted drogues as a part of life. Rawlings returned to the sweeper window. Long, clear tube transits extended across the landscape like arms from the village. They glowed at night to the exposures 5 kilometers away near the mountains. Exposures were the legal entry point for those outsiders wishing to make a new life in the village. As a young man, Rawlings stood with his application visa scan inside the exposure's smoky glass. He had waited in residence for 9 months before being granted a temporary status inside the village. Because he had entered using the correct procedure, he now had no patience with illegals. The woozy drogue voice broke his concentration.
"We are landing, Inspector."
"Good, thank you." Rawlings took his seat. The sweeper had already begun a vertical descent between the apex's security buildings. He stroked his chin and hoped that John Conrad's medical tampering problem was a mistake or a simple malfunction. He didn't need murder cases. Murder cases meant trials and an instant ending for the guilty. The practice of letting drogues enter a courtroom and placing an ending capsule over the guilty party's body had never sat well with him anyways. Having a man's body reduced to white and brown crystals in 11 seconds was not right. Like all endings, the procedure was not something he could change. Rawlings briefly met with his own men as they left the sweeper, but after a full day's work he returned to his dwelling. He used the stairs to descend to the 260th level, then waited for the horizontal tube transit. Once on the train, he still refrained from activating his imager, preferring to physically gaze into the deep cavern streets. Each of the 300 levels was inundated with blocks, colored like drogues, according to the city sectors. Inside these blocks, module dwellings and offices existed within a simulated sunlight filtered down from a fabricated skylight above the cavernous, slowly curving streets. Modules were connected by linear tube transits, while vertical tubes were staggered every few hundred meters at the stairwells. When he leaned far enough out against the glass, he saw the business district hundreds of meters below. If people wanted to leave the simulated images of their modules, they could experience real life only on the first level departure rooms or in the exposures. The transit slowed at his section, and Rawlings moved into a spacious, well-lit corridor off the main street. His module was exactly 410 steps from the transit. At the arched entry point, he was scanned, and the doors slid open. He stepped into a 40 by 40 white-walled room with side imaging sections. As the doors clamped shut, He activated the imager inside his head. Still obsessed with work, he imaged his own office, scattering it with employees and workstations so he would feel as if he were really working. On his desk screen, he summoned up John Conrad's findings. He enlarged the screen across the wall, and a series of colored body slices filled the wall. They were subtitled, Anthony Greco, age 117, second month, day 13, ending voluntary, fourth month, ninth day. Conrad's accusations were evident. In less than 2 months, a relatively healthy individual was diagnosed quickly with an advancing genetic breakdown. The pattern continued as he advanced the screen. A woman in her 70s had perfect readings 3 weeks before her own voluntary ending. This was very unusual. Endings were normally preceded by many months of medical determination. Someone was knocking within his imager. He could hear a gentle beep. Yes.
I got additional information.
Sure, John, come in. Conrad, a perplexed look on his face, stood at his desk and held a purple disc. What's on the disc there, Johnny?
I've got a live one, Harold. A Walter Embers, 72. Ending is scheduled tomorrow at 6 p.m. Son Neil in Denver section. 2 other sons on the outside. Looks like Zephyr Creek. Wife was deceased 5 years ago.
Conrad popped in the disc, stood back, and studied Walter Embers' body scan from 2 weeks ago. Readouts indicated he was 20 years younger than his biological age, but the second scan showed a body-wide deterioration. Rawlings stepped back and crossed his arms. John, have you talked to the medical advisors? What the hell is going on here? Man just doesn't fall apart, because that's what I see is about to happen to Embers.
Agreed. To answer your question, I've talked to the diagnostic people. I've got the runaround from them and the mainstream. They both tell me what's happened, and that's it.
How does Embers and his family feel about it?
Well, that's another problem. I've tried to get through to them. Neil, the son, is not answering my calls nor the messages I left in his imager. Walter Embers has shut off all communication with the outside as he prepares for his ending.
Rawlings pushed his fingertips across his eyes. The sweeper ride to the outside had been tiring. More than fatigue, he had a bad feeling about all of this. This isn't right. I keep thinking about murder, John.
Me too.
Rawlings shut off all body readouts. He had seen too many cases in his career to be stifled. Conrad must have wondered why he had shut down the images, and Rawlings kept him in anticipation. He walked over to his metal desk and pulled out his pipe. As Conrad anxiously awaited, he lit a long wooden match. Do you agree that the medical people as well as the Embers clan will not cooperate? Conrad nodded. Okay, you said he had sons on the outside. Contact them two-dimensionally. I bet all my fortunes that they don't know about his father's ending. Get them provoked while I try the medical people. I may have to bring this to a higher level, but I don't want to do anything stupid to ruin my record near retirement. Conrad sat on the edge of the desk. He raised his brows and looked up at his friend.
Harold, you and I have been doing this a long time, but I've got to tell you I haven't got the slightest idea what's going on here.
Rawlings puffed on the pipe. His eyes brightened, and he actually enjoyed being baffled. Having a challenge this late in his career was intriguing. Neither do I, John. Neither do I. Around 11 o'clock, Henry Sykes gave Mark Embers word of the village transmission. Mark immediately left his job at the garage and started up the town hill to the transmission tower. He sent Tom Cortlandt into the forest to tell Frank the village had left a message. As he moved up the half-paved road, he wondered why his father or Neil would call from the inside. The transmission shack was in a clearing overlooking more hills. Because many people had chosen the village life, it became increasingly difficult to offer communications to individual houses. All phone and visual communication had to be directed into the central shack. Now it was the link to the outside world. Henry, a little man with crystal blue eyes and a white beard, walked from the living quarters. He held a large cup of coffee. Good morning, Mark. Mark wiped his greasy hands on a rag. Henry, it has to be 90 out there, and you're drinking a hot cup of coffee? You want some?
Hot day, hot liquid, makes you sweat, keeps you cool. Mark grinned and looked across the braided rug to the old monitors on the counter. The monitors were linked, as were the old optical tables, up the white block walls through a jagged hole in the ceiling. Have you heard the message? Nope, not yet. He pulled out 2 painted oak chairs and dragged them across the tiles on the outside rug. Here, sit down, Mark. Take a load off your feet. Mark sat down. It did feel good to sit down after working on car engines all day. I don't like communications from the village, Henry. A word from on high. Henry revealed an element of truth in what he was saying. The village life his father and brother had chosen was at odds with everything he believed. With their images, villages could have everything they desired. Restraint was non-existent. Henry leaned over the counter. He pushed a button in a larger screen filled with snow. Then he reached for one of his recorders, popped out a tape relabeled in black ink at least 10 times. This is it right here. How do you keep track of everything, Henry? He pointed through his long white hair. I keep it all up here. Long as I get the parts shipments, I can keep it going. That's how I keep rebuilding cars. Henry pushed the tape back inside. Once was a time you could buy all this new, and when it didn't work, you just threw it out. Sounds like the village. Henry pushed the play button and the snow-filled screen turned blue. Then he looked at Mark. Even when you could buy something, Mark, it was never like the village excess. Well, that's true. Mark turned as the screen filled with bright yellow letters. From the office of Harold Rawlings, Village Security, Denver Sector, 16-07-345. An aging man with a long face stood in front of a busy office. He wore a blue-sleeved shirt and had a dark bow tie. Mark figured the office was a simulation, and like most people in the village, this man was really speaking from one of those bare-walled modules.
I'm Inspector Harold Rawlings. This message is for Mark and Frank Embers, Zephyr Creek Settlement. Gentlemen, my office is investigating a series of problems involving altered medical records. I do not wish to be the bearer of bad news, but your father has chosen to end his life.
Mark leaned back, grasping the chair arms tightly. He could never understand the village practice of voluntarily ending life. Now his own father would soon be dead.
Gentlemen, the reason I am transmitting this message to you involves falsified medical records. My office has discovered that other endings recently have been preceded by a radical change in medical status. We have discovered this change in your father's condition.
Rawlings walked around his desk and sat on the edge. Mark was even more appalled at the idea of endings than he was about some irregularity. The inspector's dark eyes tightened.
I need to talk with your brother and your father. We're having a great difficulty reaching both of them. By delaying this ending, we may, at the very least, be able to check the validity of the medical records. We don't want an unnecessary death here. You can reach me by transmitting to the village and inputting the Denver sector code into your computer if you have one. If not, contact the communications juncture. My imager will respond to 1066-035.
Henry laughed. Computer, that's a good one. We haven't had computer parts here in years. We'll have to do it by the phone tones.
Thank you for your cooperation in this matter.
Mark stared at the screen as it turned to blue. Henry shut off the screen and the recorder. Mark had not seen his father in 7 years. Every year, Neil met him at the exposure, 5 kilometers outside the village. To give up real life and accept the simulated imager life was incomprehensible. Can't let my father take his own life. Villagers have that right, said Henry, popping the tape. You want me to save this for Frank? Mark shook his head and stood. He walked over to the open window and swatted away a fly as he gazed down into town. The tall white steeple reminded him of real life meant real values. Nothing was simulated at Zephyr Creek. Everyone struggled to survive, and he couldn't understand how villages voluntarily ended their own lives. Now that philosophy had touched his own family members. I'm not waiting for Frank. See if you can get the village and let me know how much it will cost. Should I call Inspector Rawlings? No, not yet. Try my father. I know I can't stop my father's action, but we may delay it enough while we travel to the village. Village is 235 kilometers away, Mark, over dirt roads and uncleared highways. Mark turned from the window and stepped onto the braided rug. I've taken the journey annually, and I know the risks. But what price is to be paid to save my father's life? Everyone waited for Frank's return. Mark's children, knowing nothing of the village or their grandfather's pending suicide, were animated at the kitchen table. Mark hardly looked up from his food during the meal and was consumed by the village's elitist society. Several times he caught his wife's gentle smile across the table. Finally she stood and put her hands on his shoulders. Mark, you of all people, not being a villager, should know there are some things you can't control. Jane, they have no basic respect for life. I'm not a wide-eyed fanatic. I just have to ask why life isn't valued in the village. Oh, they say it is. They have all their options open and imagers enhancing any possibility. And they say outsiders like us in the real world have no respect for human dignity. It's a classic argument, Mark. Where is Frank? He'll be back. Word didn't get to him till later this afternoon. He'll be back. Frank, a larger man than Mark and stronger from working as a lumberjack in the forest camps, had a sloping embers forehead and curly brown hair. Still covered with tree sawdust on his tight bronzed arms, he angrily burst through the door. I'm going to the village. If I have to go tonight, Mark, I'm going. Mark, already crossing the room, was afraid he might wake the younger children. He led his brother out the front door and they walked across the porch. A faint glow from the sunset silhouetted hills and the stars twinkled across the darkening summer skies. Frank, have you seen that? Henry played back that inspector's tape. This is insane. I know it is. I placed a call to Dad, but I haven't had any response. Why the hell did Neil convince him to go to the village anyway? Mark stroked his beard and looked down. Dad was caught off guard after Mom died. He never should have gone to visit Neil while he was so vulnerable. Now it's led to this. I mean, Frank, what I would give to have Mom back here now, and now this ending, whatever the hell it is. Frank put his hand on his brother's shoulder. Listen to me. I won't allow those brain-implanted imager-headed villagers to do this. We still have time. I'm leaving tonight. By tomorrow afternoon I can arrive at the exposure and meet with Neil. Can't go alone, Frank. There'll be risk. Villagers don't take kindly to outsiders. They'll deport them into the woods and worse. You have a family here. I don't. That's my responsibility. Frank grinned and exhaled. That's the crux of it, what you just said. Responsibility. Villagers have no responsibility, only self-indulgence. Mark put his hands in his jeans pocket. Putting himself at risk with a wife and 4 little kids was not a good idea. And by being available to receive the village transmission, if it came in at all, might delay his father's suicide. He nodded his head, took out his truck keys from his pocket, and handed them to his brother. Take my truck, Frank. It's more durable than your car, and you can handle the rough roads. When you get to the exposure, call the transmission shack. Frank gazed into his brother's eyes for a moment and then hugged his brother. If I can stop it, I'll stop it. He turned and sprinted toward the shed. Mark nudged his way onto the lawn as the truck started. The headlights brightened and Frank backed down the wooded drive to the street. He beeped the horn several times. The red rear lights glowed, and the headlights illuminated the road as Frank disappeared up the forested hill. Mark prayed that Frank would be in time to avert a possible tragedy. Henry stood at the door early the next morning. A message had come through during the night indicating Mark's father would be available to receive a transmission any time during the day. Mark had learned that all attempts to contact Neil were futile. He kissed Jane and hurried with Henry on foot back to the transmission hill. Mark's heart pounded as he gazed into the tiny black camera lens atop the old monitor. What would he say to his father? He hadn't seen his father in such a long time. His father was impulsive, less patient with the real-world ways and the cold. Villagers, so used to experiencing their lives within simulated images, had lost the ability to touch out and empathize with others. A red wavy image was formed on the screen. His father was fishing by a mountain stream, knee-deep in his waders and waving with his net. He looked not a day older than when he left for the village all those years ago. Surely not the appearance of a man who was going to die. Yet Mark knew this was all a fabrication, controlled and formulated by the imager within his father's brain.
Hey, I see you, Mark. Where's Frank?
For a few moments, Mark did not know what to say, and his thoughts were clouded by a young blonde woman dressed in a brown flannel shirt and jeans who was walking up the riverbank. Maybe she was fabricated too. "Dad, I know about your ending." His father's facial expression changed. He threw down his net, and the entire screen began to reshape. There was no more river, no blonde, no idyllic country setting. Walter Embers, now gray-haired, his eyes tired and drawn, stood in a green villager suit. Around him were the simple white dwelling walls.
How did you find out, Mark? Does Frank know?
Frank knows. His father's wrinkled face tightened, and Mark felt the tears in his own eyes. He wished his father had never gone to the village. If only he could hold his father now instead of seeing an image 235 kilometers away.
Neil told you, didn't he? He wanted to go peacefully and let my form continue within an external imager. I didn't want anyone to be hurt by my death.
Mark's fist tightened and tears went down his cheek. "Dad, that's just it. Death does hurt people. You grieve and you deal with it. You fight against the reality and you move on. I don't want your death to be covered up, to be fixed within some simulation. I'm so sorry, Dad."
Mark, sadness is so unnecessary. My images will be here for you. If you lived in the village, you could have me with you always.
Only it wouldn't be you, Dad. It would be an imager telling me it was you.
It's the same, Mark.
Mark shot out of the chair. No, it's not the same. Don't you people understand? What's real is real in the real world, and it's not an image. His father didn't appear affected by his pleas. It was useless to continue an argument begun years ago in his father's living room right here in town. Mark leaned toward the camera. "Dad, Frank is on his way up there."
Why?
"Because there may be something wrong here. I've talked with some security people in the village. Please check your medical scans. There's a concern that they may not be correct. You may not be terminally ill, Dad."
Scans don't lie, Mark.
"Dad, for God's sakes, they think you might not be terminal. At least check it out, please."
You just don't want me to end my biological life.
"No, I don't. Whatever happened to saving life?"
Suffering, Mark. I'm not going to suffer.
"Then have them rescan you." His father's imager changed and he reformulated the screen. Walter Embers stood in front of his Zephyr Springs house, and Mark saw his own image with him. He turned from the screen. "I'm not going to be a party to this fabrication." He turned back from the screen. Henry shook his head and motioned toward what was now a bright white blank screen. Mark reached out slowly and ran his fingertips over the dirty glass, fully aware that he would never see his father alive again. Neil watched the drogues vacuum Walter's remaining crystals off the dwelling floor. He immediately instructed the imager in his brain to retrieve his father's form. The imager connected to Walter's dwelling imager. There was a beep and the little green drogues vanished. Then his father was before him, young and vital, perhaps in his 30s. "Hello, Neil. How is my ending?" "Quick." Neil and Walter stood by their favorite mountain stream, the same stream he had imaged Walter for Mark's benefit. Mark did not need to know that Walter had already ended. Good. It was nice of you to soothe my biological departure with Mark." Neil was so frightened that Walter was gone forever. Biological endings were so final. "Well, I am glad to see you, Walter. If only Frank and Mark could understand how far we've come. Why do they remain in such primitive conditions?" Neil knew he was only speaking with a mainstream image, as real as any village image. When Walter was biologically alive, Neil saw him more in images than in real form. To view his wide smile again was reassuring. "Well, Mark lives on the outside and refuses to align himself with the village, so I guess that means not participating, and not participating means not being able to use the imagers. He never wanted an imager inside his head." "Is Frank driving all the way from Zephyr Springs?" asked Walter. "Yes. I have to make arrangements to meet with him in the exposure." "Think of it, Neil, traveling in some gasoline-powered vehicle when you could be imaged. I don't get it." Neil was upset that Frank would bother him, but he was even more angry with Mark for trying to insinuate that the medical scans were wrong. Not to trust the advancement of science in the village was ludicrous. No wonder Mark had stayed behind. It was a cheap way to prolong Walter's life and cause needless suffering. Before I go, Dad, Razor and I, as you know, have formed a dozen biological templates. We have an appointment to approve or reject many of those templates. Substantive templates? You mean reproductive? Does it matter? No, that's good news. That's good news, Neil. Have you chosen your providers? Well, Razor has made those appointments with the village. It's important that the village have providers to nourish any offspring we might have, Walter. When the children reach a proper maturity level, we'll have our images interact with theirs and form a family situation. Throwing out all the bad templates is so stressful. Families are an important aspect of village life. You made the right decision, Neil. Once they actually birth the templates, please let me see my new grandchildren. You'll be the first to know, Walter. I'm glad you're here. Me too. See you soon, Neil. When the simulation ended, the drogues were lined up at the opening to Walter's dwelling. Like any dwelling, it contained 10 or 20 simulation rooms. The drogues probably wanted him to sign off on his own account.
Is this ending on your father's account or your account?
What difference does it make?
None.
Then put it on my father's with my voice signature. The legal mainstream will, of course, transfer all account debits and assets to the appropriate areas. But the drogues remained in front of the opening. Drogues were such bores. They didn't possess human abstract thinking and were inferior. Sometimes they annoyed him greatly. Neil spoke in a loud voice. Well, go on, get out of here.
Your brother is not eligible for entry into the exposure. Outsiders must be granted a security visa. Shall we request such a visa?
It's really none of your business. Now, come on. Humans should handle human matters, Drogue. They scattered as he moved down the transit walkway. Darkness fell over the Denver sector as he stepped into the clear transit tube. Thousands of dwelling modules, lineally embedded within the high pale green street walls, glowed white. Brightened transit tubes followed the levels above the canyon. He feared leaving the village. Outside time was different. He debated whether to interrupt his sleep pattern for Frank's arrival. Maybe he could avoid all the bickering about his father's ending if he prevented his brother's entry. Through the multi-seated transit car window, his imager formed a boring mountain scene. He quickly ordered up an image of the old west coast of the United States. He hadn't decided whether to let Frank or Mark inside the village, nor would he answer their calls. They had refused to participate in the village life, and now they had to suffer the ramifications of that decision. Being a villager, Neil would always have Walter at his beck and call. Progress had its benefits. Sarge by Robert P. Fitton. Manelli would never give up. He gripped the shopping cart's red plastic handle and steadied himself as he shuffled along the baking aisle's shiny green tiles. Hints of hazelnut and French vanilla coffee beans provided a welcome security. The overhead fluorescent tubes' glare sometimes blotted out the packages and cans. He fished for his reading glasses and then balanced them on his nose. Joanna had written his list in shaky ink on the blue post-it note. He cringed when the two teenagers appeared again down the end near the meat counter. How could he be scared of punks with gold earrings and metal pierced through their noses? At 83, he was afraid of a lot of things. "Oh, God, have mercy, according to your great mercy," he whispered. He nudged his shopping cart, only half filled with Joanna's request, and took baby steps. The cockiness made him want to run them down. 50 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, smacking them around was not a problem, but now any demands on his heart were risky. "Hey, old man," said the runt with the short, dyed blonde hair and glazed blue eyes. The sweat beaded on Manelli's brow. He pursued his lips as he cleared his throat. His voice was weaker and raspier in old age. "Hey, why don't you guys beat it?" "Dude wants us to beat it, Jackie,"
Yeah, the old fart has balls. You clowns, you don't know nothing. You don't appreciate nothing. Listen to said the runt. Can't even speak English.
Manelli raised his heavy lids. He thrust his bushy white brows up, growled, and scurried forward. But the stupid cart went faster than his weakened legs. As he grasped for the handle, he lost his footing and hit the cold floor hard. His chest tightened as the light tubes and ceiling panels swirled. He saw the punks laughing through the cart's metal-gridded sides.
The geezer's down for the count, Z-Man,
giggled the runt.
1, 2, 3. Get up, you sack of crap,
yelled the other one. Bright sneakers swung in a blur through the air, but he couldn't move. His ribs erupted in pain. He had pain before, but not like this.
Hey, you suck. Oh man, you suck,
said the runt. He closed his eyes as his chest throbbed and he called out Joanna's name. Jackie could not stop laughing as he followed the Z-Man into the meat aisle. He whipped by rows of plastic-wrapped chicken and beef in styrofoam containers. He had a thrill in his stomach when he thought about outrunning the cops.
Hey, we taught him a lesson. Yeah, well, screw him.
Near the plastic milk cartons and egg trays, 2 guys in white shirts and thin black ties ran with a single blue uniformed security officer.
Cops.
In the back of the meat room, the Z-Man cut through the green aluminum cases into the cooler area.
Hey, where's the exit?
The cold air reeked of rancid meat.
What about the freezer? Forget the freezer.
Jackie pointed to the bright red exit signs above the back door.
We're out of here.
He raced over the cement like a rock, skipping across the water, and he extended his hands toward the emergency exit bar. An alarm siren whined when he bashed the bar. He shielded his eyes to the intense outside light. His skin tingled, as if someone had spilled a fizzy Coke all over him. Why was he wearing a coat with a backpack, layers of clothing, and a bike helmet? The air was even colder than the meat room. Several distant explosions and rapid repeating gunfire meant the security guard would kill him. Z-Man wore a green army coat with lots of buttons, olive pants, and laced with scuffed brown boots. A metal green combat helmet was strapped around his chin. Jackie dove to the dirt as thundering blasts disturbed the still air, and the ensuing bullets punctured the tree bark. Jackie held his helmet as the bullets now tore up the snow and the gravel. He had a queasiness in his gut that threatened to make him upchuck his Happy Meal.
What the hell is this? How did we get here?
Pebbles rained on his metal helmet and coat. Z-Man gripped his own helmet as the sun crept through the branches and spread with deepening morning shadows down the hill. He scanned the thin clouds, brushed across the light blue sky. Jackie whispered through his teeth and fanatically inhaled the frigid air.
This is unreal.
Another bullet smacked something to his left.
Z-Man, we gotta get out of here. I don't see the door.
Steam from the blood-smoked fabric below Z-Man's pack evaporated like the fog from a quiescent country pond. Jackie repeatedly shook the Z-Man's shoulder. Then he turned him over. His eyes were huge chestnut marbles, and the deep dark maroon blood oozed over his purple lips.
No! No!
More bullets cut up the soil. The guns were only a few hundred feet away. He cupped his palms over his ears and the machine guns fired. At-a-tat, at-a-tat, at-a-tat. Somebody shouted from the tree grove below and truck engines started.
Get your ass down here, Trax. Kraut machine gun nest in the woods.
Players in Purgatory by Robert P. Fitton. Nothing looked familiar. Norman's head ached and he thought he might pass out. His cell phone was fully charged, yet he got no signal. The light from distant street lamps ahead diminished into the road as his company car whipped by the cable-connected concrete post bordering the woods. The narrow, cracked asphalt road led to a sloping drawbridge that was slowly lowered ahead, and the red and white gate started upward. Light pinpoints dotted the darkness, and a few boat masts were visible away from the bridge. The red brake lights glowed in his mirror as he slowed to a stop. A hunched-over man in a black fedora emerged from the orange incandescent glow of a guard shack behind the rising gate. He wore an open, dark coat and leaned on a cane as he shuffled to the asphalt. His sullen face and heavy eyelids resembled a wax figurine in the night. With some kind of weird accent, and still 50 feet away, his words sounded as if he were inside Norman's company car.
I've been waiting for you, Norman. You are here, on the road to nowhere.
Norman started the engine. The tires crunched in the shoulder gravel, and he rolled toward the man. The white speed limit signs and the drawbridge warning sign blurred. He flipped the headlights to high beams, yet the man did not move or cover his eyes. "Where the hell am I, old man?" he shouted out the open window. "I was on the expressway, damn it," he said, turning momentarily toward the glowing bridge.
I see no reason why you cannot cross.
"I'm lost, you numbhead." Norman banged the steering wheel. "Do you know who the hell I am?"
Yes, sir, I do.
"I'm Ralph Norman. I'm the #1 salesman in my company, bud."
Looking out for #1.
"Looking out for #1? How did you know I was going to say that?" Norman threw his coffee mug against the passenger window. "This is crazy. I was on the expressway out of Boston. I got 2 tickets to the game. Again, where the hell am I?"
You are on the road to nowhere. You will be at your destination on the other side.
"Oh, really? I paid $1,500 for both tickets. I better be near Quincy. And why is it dark outside? What the hell's going on here?" Norman opened the door. He had never seen this bridge, corrugated metal road panels looping upward with the green metal railings into the darkness. The red and white striped gate arm was locked in place, and a small screen TV overhead played a news channel inside the shack. "How do I get to Quincy, pal?"
Across the drawbridge, Mr. Norman.
"Again, how do you know who I am?" He shook his head and crossed his arms. "If I lose those tickets, old man." The thin little man smiled the lip smile of someone in charge. The man turned and walked toward the rising gate arm, but slowly vanished on the bridge. Norman moved toward the locked door handle and pounded on the window. Like the inside of a car wash, his car advanced on the metal surface. The blackness beyond the halogen street lamps caused his knuckles to whiten as he gripped the wheel. He peered back at the guard shack, but never saw the man in the long coat. Darkness swept over him like a curtain, ending the show. He pushed open his company car door. The sun hurt his eyes now. Down the alley, a crazed, thinning-haired little stump of a man waved his arms as he shouted. He wore a smudged t-shirt and a pair of dark work pants and looked as if he had just arrived from an all-nighter at the insane asylum.
I'm human! I'm human! I'm a man! I will survive!
Get lost, creep!
Don't let them find me! They will, you know! And I'll be part of them!
His words echoed between the brick walls and his watery, bloodshot eyes. A thick beard stubble was days old, clamped Norman's shoulders with his hairy hands. Norman ripped the guy's wrists away and gritted his teeth. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His eyes were transfixed and his yellow incisors protruded again as he held on to Norman's shoulders.
You don't know, do you? Oh, the players, they are clever, brother. They're clever.
This time Norman chopped this nutcase's hands back. "Listen, I'm gonna make this real simple. Beat it."
"They'll get you too."
Norman stepped toward the road, turned and then moved away as the guy's rambling faded.
"You just don't get it. They're out there, and they want you to be a part of them. I won't do it. I won't do it."
Norman crunched his eyes closed. This creep's aggravation pushed his tolerance. He spun as the guy approached from behind. "Look, Pally, I don't know what the hell your problem is, and I really don't care. Lunatics like you should exit back to the funny farm with the rest of the mush brains. And you just stay away from me." He jabbed his finger into the guy's chest. "Got it?"
"You walk a mile in my shoes, brother."
Froth gathered around the corners of his mouth. "I don't give a damn about your shoes, brother."
"My name is Jonas Smeltzer. You want them to take me to Gerstein's?"
"Shut up, you goof," said Norman as he marched back to the street. "Gerstein's funeral parlor. There's this room behind the funeral parlor itself." "I got bigger things to worry about than you and your stiffs at the funeral home." Norman clicked his keys and jaunted back to his company car. He tried his phone as he ran, but he got no signal. Smelter stumbled after him. "Don't be a fool, Norman!" Norman skidded to a stop and he faced Smelter about 20 yards away. "How do you know my name?" He rushed forward and ripped at Smelter's arm. "I asked you a question, moron. How do you know my name?" Smelter slurred his words and panned skyward as his eyes widened. "I have a sixth sense. I just know. There's 13 of them in the ethereal plane. Am I just to be absorbed into their being? Am I?" "You're mental," said Norman, dialing Billy on his cell as he returned to his company car. Norman pinched the 2 Oakland tickets between his thumb and index finger. Billy wouldn't believe he had 50-yard line tickets. Billy answered after a couple of rings.
"Yeah."
"Okay, Billy D, I got him. 50-yard line, dude."
"Okay."
"You don't sound very enthused." After a short silence, Billy cleared his throat.
"When can I go? Jenkins tells me I gotta do the work inventory, so I can't go."
"Get out of it. We're talking 50-yard lines, Billy."
"I'll ask around."
Norman held out the phone and shook his head. He stuffed the tickets back in his shirt pocket. "Yeah, you do that." He turned as Smelter poked his flattened face around a parked pickup. His mouth was open for several seconds before he spoke. "You can hear them. That high-pitched beep, like when the doctor gives you a hearing test, and the shaking, and the vibration. You know they're coming or they're near." "You're nuts, bozo. Bring me to the game so I can hide." Norman tightened his fist. "You want the cops over here, Smelter?" Cops don't have any power, but some of the players are cops. 13 players have the power of everyone who's been absorbed into the ethereal plane." Norman crossed the pavement with the deliberateness of a running back finding open ground. He clicked the locks on his car and yanked the door open toward him. Then he slid into the seat. The engine spun with a quick twist of the keys. Norman grabbed the door handle before he could secure the door. Smelter leaped and lifted the tickets from his pockets. Hey, Smelter!" Smelter slipped on the asphalt and scrambled down the street. "You son of a bitch!" Norman left the company car running and didn't even close the door as he chased the grubby Smelter down the sidewalk. "I paid for those tickets, creep!" Smelter darted to his left. An oncoming pickup's brakes squealed, and then tires slid across the grit. Norman maneuvered between the parked cars. A man with short gray hair swung like a released slingshot around an open pickup door. Norman pawed his way through the gathering crowd. 2 young men lifted a dazed Smelter to his feet. Smelter opened and closed his blue eyes as he slowly scanned the crowd. A man in a blue shirt and amber striped tie clenched his wide jaw and furrowed his rusty brows. "Kendall! You're Frank Kendall! You're a player! You hired this guy to run me down!" "I never have met you before in my life, buddy." "I hear the beep. Oh my God! The ground is moving!" Smelter staggered back and fought to maintain his balance. "You want me to tell them all? Do you, Kendall? You want me to tell them how you and Rundle were at the bus terminal when I tried to leave the city this morning?" "Did anyone call the EMTs?" asked Kendall. "This man is obviously sick." "Oh, no you don't," said Smelter, holding the awning support poles as he backed to the sidewalk. "So that's the plan. Have the other players show up in the ambulance and then take me to Gerstein's. You think I'm an idiot? No way!" Norman called out. "Hey, you, Smelter, give me my damn tickets." "Somebody call the cops," yelled a tall man with a shaved head and denim shirt. Smelter retreated down the adjacent street. "I won't let them get me. I won't become a part of them." Norman ran faster as Smelter veered toward a dirty blue city bus near the curb and then darted inside. The bus nudged slowly away from the curb, spewing billowing exhaust toward Norman as he screamed for the driver in the side mirror.
Hey, that man has my football tickets!
Winded, Norman slowed as the fiery-eyed smelter, his arms and hands pressed against the rear bus window, slowly moved away. He thought about chasing the bus to the next stop, or perhaps he could hail a cab. Instead, he trekked across a side lawn and back to his company car. That bus was headed down the adjacent street and into the city itself. He kicked open an aluminum gate, but his company car was gone as he panned left.
Damn you, Smelter!
The taxi raced down the adjacent street after the bus. Norman leaned forward into the front seat.
Get that bus! Man stole my football tickets.
I know, Bub, I know,
said the driver. Norman stared at his hairy brow and wide jaw.
Haven't I seen you somewhere before?
I ain't never met you.
His cell phone sounded. Hello.
This is Sergeant Devers. We found your car, Mr. Norman.
Good work, Sergeant.
Abandoned.
I'm impressed. Where can I pick it up?
Eddie's Auto Salvage. It's right next to Gerstein's funeral home.
Where's Gerstein? Where? Gerstein's?
Right.